Hello, footy fans, and welcome back to the Chip and Chase podcast here on this lovely Monday evening, ready to rip and tear into our round 21 review. But it's not an ordinary review this week. We are joined by Jai from Blindside NRL Fantasy. Jai, mate, how are you doing today?
Good, dude. I'm cruising. A bit of a rough week if you follow our page at all. I told everyone to fade Cleary or watch Cleary just for one more week, and he's turned up on fantasy and made me look stupid. So I'm still in recovery, but on to next week.
Mate, that's just it. There's the highs and lows of Supercoach and fantasy. It is a bit of a shame that you're a fantasy player over there. Of course, we do the odd Supercoach over on this side of things. But, yeah, Cleary over in Supercoach as well, 175 he scored over here. I was talking to a lot of people who had vice captains on James Tedesco, who went really big as well, telling everybody, loop that. It's a really good score to loop. And then, yeah, Cleary comes and does what he does. So what can you do, really?
Yeah. He was super impressive, man. Like, look, I put out a lot of stuff on it. There was just so much narrative on how he was a buy. I think just in general, like that my post is relevant to Supercoach and NRL Fantasy. But if you were to put the risk factors over anybody else in the competition, you would genuinely be like, okay, you could go either way with it. And that's kind of how it was. It was like you can buy Cleary or you can watch Cleary for 1 week, but these risk factors are probably worth taking note of. But if he survives this week and we have no issues, a lot of those risk factors will be mitigated. It just didn't work. It just didn't work that way in my favour, but at least now he's a certainty to buy.
No, that's just it, mate. They can come. Everything that you sort of did put up in your articles was 100% correct. And if those of you who aren't following Blindside, go give him a look in. Even if you are a Supercoach player like us, a lot of the same stuff applies. They're very similar games, very similar scoring systems. So a lot of the stuff that Jai posts over on Blindside, you can very much take into account. So definitely go give him a follow. Do you want to touch into a bit more of everything that you do over on your page, mate?
Yeah, dude, Blindside's just your general NRL fantasy channel. We just provide analysis and insight on all things rugby league, really. We've got a few different verticals. It's heavily focused on fantasy, but we're constantly putting out new news so that everyone's up to date with all the current news in the area. We post like deep dives on certain players, sometimes on fantasy specific, but sometimes just more general of nature. Bringing out our podcast next year and everything as well. So yeah, it's NRL fantasy with a mostly rugby league focus in a general sense, but a lot of focus on fantasy as well. Who knows, might join the Supercoach space one day, but yeah, as you said, it's you didn't say it, but we say it. It's the bottom tier fantasy sports vertical.
Mate, I'm not having absolutely not having a bar of that. But let's get right into our team of the week to kick things off here today. So, team of the week for round 21, kicking us off at fullback. We've gone with Connor Tracy. Now, a few good options in the fullback position this week, notably James Tedesco as an absentee. But I thought Connor Tracy, what he did this week in a game that, many people weren't tipping the Bulldogs to really get that done. I thought he was absolutely tremendous. What do you think, Jai?
Yeah, Tracy was brilliant. Like 3 tries, I think he scored, hat-trick. He just looks great, and the players he has around him, I think special mention, you've got him as well, but special mention to Jacob Kiraz, man. Like having him as part of the backline play, especially with the absence of Crichton, it really unlocks Tracy. And Tracy just takes advantage. He's really good at floating on both sides of the ruck. And look, Bulldogs are in some hell of a form at the moment as well. To get that done over the Broncos, even though they're in somewhat of a form slump, they were motivated to get that win too, just as much as the Bulldogs were. So Tracy was very impressive. Probably will go close outside of Cleary and Hudson Young for me, but outside of those two, I think Connor Tracy is up there for probably the player of the round.
No, you're damn right with that one too. One of my all-time faves, Connor Tracy. He's gone the hard way to get where he is, but I love what he does, mate. You mentioned Jacob Kiraz there. We do have him in the team of the week in our centres, along with Joseph Suoli'i. You touched on Kiraz, so we'll touch on Suoli'i. How do you find Suoli'i's performance in round 21?
He's strong, man. He's just real dominant player. I like watching him play. It's a shame he's going to rugby next year, but who knows? Could do the pivot and come back like some of them do. But and it's going to free up a lot of cash for the Roosters, and a little bit of news with Valentine Holmes looking for the open market. I'm surprised if the Roosters try and dive at him. But yeah, Suaalii, man, he got picked at Origin this year for a reason, and it was a shame he didn't get a chance to back up. He's a strong player.
That's just it, mate. Suaalii. Yeah, the news of Valentine Holmes being targeted by the Roosters. Heard the Dragons are having a look in there as well. I mean, Roosters with cash to splash, very much a good target. But let's move into our wingers. Kicking things off, Will Warbrick for the Melbourne Storm, and he has partnered with Kyle Feldt. Give me your thoughts on these two players this round.
Warbrick was super impressive. Again, he's just a beneficiary of a great attacking team. Even though the Eels put it to the Storm, which was very, very surprising. Like nearly was looking like possibly the upset of the round. But Warbrick, he's just. Well, I think he ran for over 300 metres in that game as well, which was insane. And he might have copped a bit of an injury towards the end of the game. I'm not too sure 100%, but he did go down. But yeah, Warbrick was great. And then Felty, well, look, I don't have much nice things to say about Felty because he did it all against the Sharkies. But look, 3-try hero again. What can you say? You can't knock a performance when they're scoring hat tricks. They both did great, Warbrick and Felty.
That's exactly right. You really cannot be doubting players when they're running in easy hat tricks, unfortunately, against your team, the Sharkies. But into the halves here, 5'8". We've gone with Jaden Campbell. Now, wasn't the most outrageous position for outstanding performances in round 21. There weren't too many that stood out to me. I thought Luke Brooks in a losing effort was quite good, but Jaden Campbell, to get the Titans in there, back in their winning ways in this one, to get another rundown win against the Dolphins, I thought he was instrumental in that performance.
Yep, I completely agree. He's my 5'8" of the round. Well, my team of the week's a little bit different. We kind of just go off fantasy scores, and half covers both half and 5'8". So I've got two different players for me. But if I had to pick a 5'8", it's Jaden Campbell. His attack unlocks that team, specifically inside the opposition 20. It seems that they just turn to him, and he's so nimble. He's so good. He's similar to Cody Walker, so good at picking the right ball to pass. He doesn't seem to be too premeditated. There was one play there I watched closely where I can't remember who we put over off the top of my head. I think it was Brian Kelly. And Brian Kelly ran a great line, great hold. I think it was the second half in their comeback. And you could watch Jaden Campbell just watching, I think it was Avarillo. And then Avarillo jammed in to take him, and then he just looked straight to Kelly and hit the hole. And I was like, mate, for someone that's a specialist fullback that's been moved into the halves to create some sort of energy there at the Titans, I don't see them ever moving him. He a great performance this round, and I did expect it for the rest of the year.
That's just it, mate. He's been in great attacking form ever since he got shifted there. But, of course, partnering him in the halves at the halfback position, Nathan Cleary. You mentioned him as one of the top three performances of the round. Is he your number one this week?
100%. Absolutely. How can you, first of all, he's a half and he scored a hat trick. But my God, what he's been through, man, 5 injuries specific to that. I think it's his right leg, right hamstring is the focus. But he just keeps bouncing back. You'd expect some level of hesitation in his return, but he is just on fire, involved in everything. That Panthers look like a completely different team without him, and they're still great, but they're just, him coming back this week kind of showed me that the Panthers are still number one in this competition, that you'd be tipping them to win the premiership again. Yeah, look, I've got nothing but good words for Chin. I'm just dirty. I don't have him in my fantasy team yet.
And that's just it, mate. But as you said, you can just reload and bring him in this week. Let's move into our front rowers for round 21. And Fanua-Blake from the Wars gets himself another look in here, joined by Mo Fotuaika in what is his first appearance in the team of the week this season. I thought he's had a pretty down season, Fotuaika, but I think the Origin sort of period there really rejuvenated him, and I thought he's been tremendous for the Titans recently.
I completely agree. Fotuaika's just come out of the blocks. It seems to be a bit of a thing. You've got some, like Kevin Walters has been in the media saying that Origin has affected his team, but seems to be pretty much general consensus from a lot of coaches that they love when their players play Origin and then come back because there's like a renewed sense of confidence. The players come back better than when they went in, and you can see that with Fodawaker. Like, he was dominant. He didn't even play like an excessive amount of minutes to justify the increased score. It was just an insane workload for the time that he had on the field. He was impressive. It'd be interesting to see if he can back it up for the rest of the year, but even just that game last week was super impressive.
That's just it. And the Titans are very much going to need him to back up with, of course, Big Tino out for the season and Jamin Jolliffe, who I think has been a big loss for them as well. So Fodawaker in this form is exactly what the Titans need. And Fanua Blake, he's in here almost every second week. We don't need to touch on him too much. Harry Grant, we've gone with that hooker. Similar vein to Jaden Campbell in the sense that there weren't too many standout hooking options this week. But I thought Harry Grant, normally if there's nobody standing out too much, Harry Grant's normally a lock in that role.
Yeah, Harry Grant's brilliant. He's definitely the beneficiary of a bit of luck there, scoring that try off an error. But I have a special mention to Api Coruscant would be my addition here. Is Corrie, even in a losing team, and they didn't even lose by a little bit. Like, they looked like they were behind the 8 ball the whole game and never looked like a chance of beating the Wilds. But Api Coruscant finally put it to him. You know, he's had a lot of expectation on his shoulders since he left the Panthers, being a 3-time premiership winner, and he hasn't really seen the form that he's seen at the Panthers, and that you put that safely down to them just being a lesser quality side. He's got a lot more work to do, but he stood up. He didn't look to turn off at all in that game, and that particularly impressed me.
No, for sure. Appy definitely could have been a category in a few categories. Appy, of course, playing halfback in hooker as well. He was very good against the Warriors. Let's move into our back row positions. A couple of Panthers and, of course, another man that you mentioned. Let's start with Hudson Young. Mentioned him as one of your top 3 performers of the week. What a game he did to close out round 21.
100%. Hudson Young, he was super impressive last week as well, and he took tries to get him to that effort, to that pinnacle. And this week, it's no tries. It was just a whole bunch of tackle busts. I think something like 11 tackle busts he pulled off in that game. He was offloading the ball, making tackles. He just is getting so involved. And look, you could maybe, it's a bit of a narrative, but you could maybe put it down to him getting faded in Origin. And he's just come back with a chip on his shoulder. He's that kind of player that would fit that narrative. Like, he's got a bit of that mongrel in him. But yeah, look, he's in fantasy, NRL fantasy sense, he's less than 2% ownership and only 0.13% ownership in the top 1,000. So nobody's holding him. And look, he is risky. He does have flaws where he's busting underneath 40 points in NRL fantasy, which isn't ideal. But if he's hitting ceilings like this and this kind of form, Raiders needing to make the finals and needing wins, he's going to be heavily involved in that transition. So look, it wouldn't turn people off having a dive into him, but just his performance in a general sense was super impressive.
Seems like he fits the bill in fantasy that he does in Supercoach. Always one of those players that borders on almost keeper or very, very close to the scores he can produce, but very low ownership over in the Supercoach realm as well. Let's move into the other 2 back rowers that lock this up. We have Liam Martin as the other second rower and Isaiah Yeo, 2 Panthers boys to round out the starting 13. We'll touch a bit more of them in depth when we get to the Panthers review. So let's touch on the bench. Now, of course, if you guys don't know, our bench takes form in the form of an outside back, the best outside back, in my opinion, who didn't make the starting 13, the best spine player who didn't make the starting 13, the best forward who didn't make the starting 13, and the best bench player of the round. So kicking things off with our best outside back, I've gone with Jarrell Skelton in that jersey 14. What do you make of Jarrell's performance for the Bulldogs in round 21, Jai?
He's been great ever since he got his little call up on the wing. I think it was through injury. He got caught up at O'Carr, maybe it was, off the top of my head. And I think Blake Wilson played on the other wing in his first match for the team for the year. But he is like that typical Micah Sevo, hard-running, dominant winger. I'd hate to be standing in front of him as a defender. And he just keeps doing that, just tackle busts. And look, the current format of NRL these days is you need your back 3 to be strong and tough with those kick returns, and he just fits the profile. I think every game he plays, he's going to get better and better and better with experience. And I'm not surprised to see him start getting his name in teams of the week.
No, he is an absolute gun, Jarrell Skelton. Number 15, James Tedesco. That's our best spine player of the week. It was a weird week where a performance like that gets you into the team of the week almost every other week, but Connor Tracy edged him out. But he did find himself a spot on the bench. We will touch a lot more in depth about Tedesco when we get to the Roosters game, I'm sure. Keon Kalor-Matangi at 16. I mean, he's also been copy and paste in my team of the week, essentially, ever since he got moved to that lock forward position. What do you make of the Rabbitohs moving him there? And is he there at 13 long term, or does Cam Murray shift back there?
That's a good question. I'd probably go on a bit more with the Cleary approach here with my perspective on it. But my thought was that they moved him to lock with Murray injured, and he played so well there that because they tried it with Tallis Duncan and Kalor-Matangi couldn't really see form on the edge, and Tallis Duncan wasn't really hitting the stride they needed him to. I think he was paired with Havili. Havili eventually got dropped, Tallis Duncan back to the bench, and then moved Kalor-Matangi to lock. There was rumour there that Wayne Bennett said something about that rotation. So they've held that rotation ever since, even upon the return of Cam Murray, and it seems to be working. But my feeling is that they put Cam Murray on the edge from his return from injury, and then kind of over the origin period as a way to kind of game manage him. And my perspective is that once he comes back from suspension, it's very likely he's going to get named back at lock and Kalor-Matangi move back to the edge. I won't be surprised if that doesn't happen because Kalor-Matangi has been amazing for them. But Cam Murray is... what would you say, like a default lock? Like that's his position, and he's always played that, and he's the captain of their side. So, you know, he kind of feels like he needs to be there, and Kalor-Matangi could be on the edge, but I don't know. For me personally, if I'm watching this week, if Murray's named at lock, he's going straight in my fantasy team.
Definitely a lot of moving parts in that whole shebang there. But lastly, the last man on our bench, which, of course, is actually the bench player of the round for me, Lindsay Smith from the Penrith Panthers. I thought he was tremendous. Jai, what do you think of him?
Yeah, great as well. I'm pretty sure I heard some commentary that he's the only player in the Panthers this year to play in every single game. So, which is just a testament to his consistency. He's just, for fantasy, he's just not really on the radar because, well, personally, I don't buy players that play off the bench. So that's kind of why I've faded him, but he's definitely put his name out there. And who knows, with Fisher Harris gone next year and then maybe needing more pressure up front, he could see his name rotate into the starting lineup.
Definitely. Between him and Liam Henry, I think the Panthers are well placed to just do that next man up mentality once again. But that concludes our team of the week. Once again, guys, that is up on the Instagram. So if you aren't following, go and check us out at Chip and Chase Podcast on Instagram. Show that some love. A lot of hard work goes into those graphics. Let's move into the actual games of round 21, kicking things off with the Warriors and the Tigers in the first game of the round. Was finally cracking their bit of a lull in form by defeating the Tigers in this one. Jai, what do you make of this game?
Yeah, I thought it was a bit like that. It just seemed like the Warriors, like it should have been a bigger blowout than what it was. It just seemed like the Warriors could make the meters and they were getting down the end of the field, but they just couldn't capitalize on the position. So it just kept leading to the Tigers kind of staying in the fight. And then every now and then you'd see a bit of momentum come back and they'd half capitalize and score a few points. But I guess it's a testament to their defense as well, because they also didn't let the Tigers push back onto them. But that was the general nature of it for me.
Yeah, I thought the Warriors back five in this one were really, really good. Dallin Watene-Zelezniak's runs out of his own end to get them out of trouble were probably the best he's done all season. They were out of this world, in my opinion, and he got a really well-deserved try when he backed up Moala Graham Taff on that right-hand side towards the end of the game. Mate, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, back at fullback, doing what he does, almost 300 metres, at least 3 try-saving efforts on Luke Laulii, Stafford Toa and Jareem Buller. What do you make of Roger? Do you think he should be the Warriors fullback, or what do you think?
I think so. I think he should. My initial, I literally wrote down in my notes right in front of me in the first half, I'm not a fan of RTS at fullback. He's just not consistent. He's just not positioning himself right. So for you to put in all those stats that you just suggested then is basically what he did majority in the second half of the performance. And the second half, my very next thing says, take back what I said of RTS, put him at fullback. So, you know, he's got it there. And I think he can't just play wing, play centre, and then play fullback and expect greatness from him. But the fact that he put that kind of effort onto the park in mostly 60-minute performance, I don't think they can put anyone else there. He needs to be there.
It's a very interesting one because I think in what Roger brings in his efforts in up the back and his defensive efforts, which are out of this world, he's passing game definitely leaves a lot to be desired, but in this current state of the Warriors team, without their directed playmaker of Sean Johnson, which really frees up that out the back sort of play, which is why Charles Nickel-Klukstar was so good last year and earlier on this season. I think without Sean in there, I think this is really complements Roger at the back. In saying that, I think it's a move made easier by how good Ali Leitao has been in the centres. What do you make of his game in this one?
He was so good. He was strong for a rookie. I think he needs to hold that spot. The concern would be, well, when CNK comes back, where does that push RTS, and then who does that push elsewhere? I think, though, he's done enough since he's been in the team to kind of put his hand up to stay. And Tuapiki isn't really a problem if CNK's in the side. He's always kind of been back up anyway. So I just hope to see him stay. I think he's got he's put forward his case. Let's just hopefully the Warriors stay on top of him.
That's 100% the way I sort of feel about it. I think what he's done has been instrumental, especially even in last year when he made that debut. I think he only got through the one game last year, but defensively, he really doesn't shirk away from it. He's a big body, gets through his contact, isn't afraid to run to the outside as well. He's got a lot of facets to his game. I think, you know, if they are going to lean back into the Sean Johnson, Charles Nickel-Klukstar way of play when they return from injury, maybe Roger goes to a wing, because I don't think you can displace Ali at the moment, and maybe in a perfect world, Rocco Berry, when he's back from injury, will take that other centre position to shore up the defence.
Yeah, completely agree. That sounds like the best backline to me.
Over to the Tigers, however. Look, another game. It's been a very tough season for the Tigers. I think this year they've definitely improved from the last couple of seasons, in my opinion. Whether or not they end up winning the spoon, or I guess losing the spoon, remains to be seen. But regardless, I think there's definitely made improvements there. They're playing a lot tougher. Consistency isn't there, but you can see it in the way Lockie Galvin has led this team around. God, he just does not stop going, does he?
No, I'm so impressed by him. I think that's their problem, is that he's their only point of attack, or attack enough to worry a defensive line. So it takes 20 minutes or a bit of team study at the start of the week to just worry about covering him, and the Tigers seem to fall to crap. You can sort of see towards the end of that game, I'd say from the second half, the Warriors just started swamping him, and then the ball's just getting thrown along the ground, and nobody's really there to pick it up. They're not doing anything with their attacking position. But yeah, Galvin in that team is amazing, and he's a rookie, which is crazy for him to be performing like that. I hate to align him to this guy already, but it's very similar to how Cleary started in the NRL, just that real dominant rookie season. Everyone's got eyes on him, but look, not everyone's Cleary, so it's how many years in a row can you do it for? But Galvin's put his hand up.
Yeah, I don't think he could have said it any better. We think back to Nathan Cleary, 2016, his debut. That was one of the best rookie classes I've ever seen. Ash Taylor winning Rookie of the Year over the likes of Latrell Mitchell, Bevan French in a fantastic try-scoring year, and of course Nathan Cleary. I thought Nathan Cleary in that debut year was probably the pick of the bunch, but didn't debut till a bit later in the season. Lockie Galvin also ruled out of that Rookie of the Year award due to that suspension, which, don't get me started on that. I don't think you should be losing awards to suspensions unless it's a bit adverse, but I think that all but locks up Ethan Strange for it. But the way Lockie Galvin is controlling this team at his age, he's been so much better than I expected. Mate, you mentioned the Tigers, and at the moment they're a bit one-dimensional, because as soon as the Warriors started rushing up on Galvin and taking away that space, they didn't have anywhere to go. I'm going to put you on the spot here. What signings, avoid of money to an extent, don't go and sign any absolute superstars like Nathan Cleary, because of course Nathan Cleary is the answer to essentially every team in the NRL. But what signings do you reckon you'd be looking to make if you're at the West Tigers at the moment?
I think it'd be two directions if I was coaching. And it's very similar to how Craig Fitzgibbon has handled the Cronulla Sharks. You'll notice that since he started with the coaching at Cronulla, we've signed 2 players, and the rest has just been all in-house. Like maintain your current stock. Like promote rookies, give them opportunities when they get the chance, give them experience. I think the Tigers really need to focus on a similar thing, and only targeting big name players that are relevant. So they've got Jerome Luai coming in next year, which begs the question, who are you going to play in the halves with him? Which they've noted that Latu Fainu is the future of the club, but Lockie Galvin, I don't see how you can push him out. So I'd say Jerome Luai and Lockie Galvin would be a great halves pairing. I think Luai would probably play number 7. He's proved himself this year that he could do it in the absence of Cleary. Galvin at 6, that definitely creates 2 elements of attack, which they're missing at the moment. They've got to improve their centres. If Dewey stays fit, they've got one locked down. But then, I think they could sign a big name centre instead of this rotation of Naden and stuff like that. Unless they've got junior crop, like they got Far Tape that they could probably play in the centres, but maybe he needs a bit more experience. I think it's mostly their backline. Their forward pack is full of juniors that are strong. So I just hope that they foster that talent. They're losing Utoika Manu, which is unfortunate, but, they need to foster that homegrown talent and build a team around it.
That's just it, man. I also think the outside backs are an area to focus for them. Signing news out of today, besides the massive news of Stefano informing the Tigers he will depart the club at the end of the season, looking like the Storm and the Bulldogs lead the way for his signature. Daniel Tupou just re-signed for 2 years for the Roosters. He was someone, I never saw it coming, I never saw the Tigers actually being a sniff of signing him, but he is someone who I thought that would be an unreal signing for the Tigers. The professionalism and consistency he brings, effort out of his own ends. I thought he'd be a perfect little signing for them, but never really saw that eventuating. I think someone like a Jarrell Skelton, of course, over at the Bulldogs, stuck behind a few players. Think him out of his own end. Obviously needs to cut down errors and defensive lapses, which Tigers are prone to, but players like that, there is definitely a few on the market for the Tigers to sign.
Absolutely. It's a shame, though, that the Roosters are getting rid of Swaleti and Manu because they got so much money to throw at those kind of players. Mm-hmm. And it's like now you're up against the Roosters. It's like, oh, God, all right, poor Tigers. But look, I think they can do it. They just need more time, which is, I know, probably a narrative they've heard for years. But it's just a shame they haven't. They've had the time and then they lose certain pieces, something happened, like they've changed the coach again. They got Benji. This year they've just dropped Robbie Farah. So, hopefully they can just put something together more long term and just stay grounded. It's unfortunate. It's just been going on for so long now that it's started to get to the point where it's very urgent. But I think just being calm and playing it slow, who knows? They could do well next year. I hope they do. Luai's big for them. So hopefully he puts something together.
That's just it. If Luai hadn't gone on that run this year playing halfback, then I would have been a bit more worried about the signing. When he originally signed on the big money, and after seeing how well Lockie Galvin progressed, I was a bit like, oh, is this really the answer for the Tigers? But look, I'm in the same mode. I think I can speak for almost every NRL fan where we don't want to see the Tigers win another spoon. They've done their dues. I really hope that the future is bright for them. They've got a lot of great juniors. The Fainu brothers, all of them look like real stars and stars of the future. So hopefully we can see them progress, and maybe they've got a game coming up against the Eels in the next couple of weeks. Depending on how these two teams play in the next couple games, that could really determine who wins the spoon there. So hopefully, and this is me pissing on Parramatta, but I don't want the Tigers to lose and win the spoon again. So hopefully they can get it done there. That leads us into the second game. However, the Eels we just spoke of, going down to the Storm in almost a nail biter. I mean, the scoreline, in my opinion, doesn't reflect how gutsy the Eels were in this game. I thought they put up a really good effort in this one. Storm, I mean, they find a way to win ugly, and even when it's winning ugly, you look at the scoreline and it's not that ugly. So
yeah. It was enough to get Craig Bellamy to walk out of the coach's box, and he was blowing up Deluxe. Like, I'm not sure if you were watching it, but in our little Patreon chat with our paid subscribers, like, I was commenting on it, just being like, he's definitely throwing chairs at halftime. Like, without a doubt, he was going mental. But look, you can see it. But in a way, out of the heat of the moment, it's good to see that even though the Storm probably walked into that game thinking that they were going to smash the Eels, that even in a tough fighting game, they can still come out on top with that much dominance. I think you need to test that side of yourself and that resilience as a team coming into the finals series. So as much as it sucked for that week for the Storm and how Bellamy won't be happy with the performance, I think it's good to see that the Storm can still be capable of those experiences and come out on top.
Very much so. I think the Storm this season have been quite scrappy, getting a lot of wins for sure. 2 wins clear of second place on the ladder in the Panthers at the moment. But I haven't been too convinced in any of their performances until last week against the Roosters. But I thought that might have been the turning point, and from then on they'd sort of gone a bit of a storm home, especially with the Eels upcoming, Cameron Munster coming back into the side. So to see the Eels get out there and ruffle the feathers early and the Storm really have a bit of a wake-up call and go, oh shit, this isn't as easy as we thought, and then to pull their heads in and finish that game the way they did, I thought they were really, really good in that second half to really get that one back and prove why they are as good as they are.
Completely agree, 100%. I think that if you were to pick 2 teams for the grand final this year, it's Storm and Panthers at this point for me. Or you could throw the Roosters in there, but the Roosters this weekend kind of made me go, oh, I don't know. So I don't know. It's between those 3 teams for me. I'll bet the Sharks will win it. That's my guess. But if I'm being logically minded, then yeah, it's those 3 guys.
No, I completely agree. I think it is between those 3 teams. Sharkies, look, I think maybe next year with you guys getting our beloved Adam Fanua-Blake could be the year for you guys. I think he might be one of those pieces that you need, but still a good side. For the Storm, any standouts for you? I think Grant Anderson, the past few weeks since he's been called into the side, has been unreal for the Melbourne Storm.
Yeah, he's been super impressive. I've really liked him. I was really worried about whether he would come back this week after that. It looked like a hectic knee injury, but suppose NRL Physio shout out to NRL Physio, by the way. He puts out some really, really great, insightful content
One
and
of
on
the
a
best
whim.
in the business.
Yeah, he just sees it and then makes a post on it, and it's just like an information he puts in his captions. It's just like, whoa, okay, dude, super helpful. And you find over time, you start to see these injuries and have a guess at what they might be before they're talking about it because of how well he articulates it. So yeah, great stuff. But yeah, with the look of that injury, it looked like to me at the time, it was like, whoa, he's gone for good. And then physio's like, oh no, like it just looks like a sprain. He could be back as soon as next week. And then what do you know? Or hyperextension, I think it was. And he could be back as soon as next week. And then he's come out next week and just blown it off the park. So yeah, very impressed with him. I think Wishart's my shout. He's been dominant in the halves with Hughes in the absence of Munster, which you would think would nearly push the Storm down to a lesser quality side. And Wishart will be in the team. I think he'll just move back to utility. But I've got a feeling he might even start taking a few minutes off Harry Grant because he has a huge defensive workload in at hooker. And that could give Grant a spell. And fantasy speaking, Grant performs better in 60-minute performances than he does over 80 minutes. And I think that there's some players, generally speaking, that have that kind of framework to their scoring for fantasy. It's nearly like they pace themselves for an 80-minute performance, but when they know that they have a shorter performance ahead of them, they go all out. And Cary Grant has just always fit that caliber of player. So, won't be surprised to see Wishart move into that utility again.
No, you're absolutely hit the nail on the head there. Tyron Wishart this season has been unreal. Someone who, I'd never really seen. He has had very limited opportunities to really have an 80-minute performance in a certain position, especially in the halves, which is his most natural. Played at hooker, played at fullback at stages last year. Obviously, in the finals last year, he was fantastic as well. But this year, in that extended run at 5'8", I think he's been unreal. Definitely a player that's too good to be sitting on the bench or too good to be in reserve grade. So someone that a lot of clubs could be targeting, maybe someone that the Dragons could look at. I think their halves this season have been quite good in Kyle Flanagan and Ben Hunt, but Ben Hunt's not getting any older. Is Kyle Flanagan going to be the man to lead them from then on? Tyron Wishart, I think he's a Dragons junior, isn't he?
Too sure. I know his father used to play back in like the Fletcher Tallis era, but I'm not too sure what club he played for. Look, I wouldn't be surprised. Wishart kind of looks like a Dragon, to be honest, and I think you've got a good shout there. I don't know if I like Flanagan long term for the halves. Dragons. I think he needs to stay at 5'8", but someone like Wishart could really step up into that role. That's a really good shout, to be honest. I wouldn't be surprised if he's coming off contract if Dragons try and target him.
Well, the thing with Flanagan as well was originally he was signed there to be essentially a number 14 in a hooking or half sort of role, and they had the young fella Ronald Volkman from the Warriors as that 5'8" until his injury, and then it all sort of shifted and he became that 5'8". And I think, you know, Flanagan's done a really good job in the role he's had there. I think he's been one of their most consistent players, but yeah, I don't know. We'll get to the Dragons in a bit. Definitely not the team that we're meant to be talking about right now. But yeah, Wishart, too good to be playing reserve grade or even off the bench, in my opinion. Any other standout players for you for the Melbourne Storm?
Trying to think off the top of my head in particular. I think that really the forward pack was just kind of stock standard. Nothing really too dramatic for me that stood out there. I'd say probably Pappenhausen's worth a shout. He's dealing with a plantar flexor, or essentially in layman's terms, he's got a heel problem that he's constantly having to get injections for and pain manage week to week. So I always admire players that are in that situation and putting out quality performances. So good on Pappenhausen for keeping it going.
For sure, I love it, and one of the true good guys of the NRL. Someone that I think the entire NRL community, when you see him get injured, everyone feels the weight of the world coming down on them. So for him to be playing as tough as he is, it's a true testament to the character he is. He's such a good football player, such a tough footy player. And you mentioned the Storm forward pack there that just stock standard up to what they sort of do every week. I think that's the big thing for the Storm. They've been doing that all season. Everyone coming into this season, even last season, said they're a quality gun middle forward away from really contending again. I don't think they are. After seeing what they're doing this season, they didn't really get anyone to fill that void, obviously targeting Stefano for the coming seasons, and maybe he's the man to do it. But the way that they're playing with everybody just stepping up, Christian Welch and Nelson have taken backward steps in their role, and they keep getting better, arguably, the Melbourne Storm. So I think, you can argue that Eli Katoa and Sean Bloor have been their more dynamic players this season, but the Storm, they just keep getting it done with their forward pack.
100%, and I think that you hit it there, like absolutely spot on. Was saying that they lack that experience and that A-class player in their lineup, or maybe two, to really say, hey, they're going to be in charge of the premiership this year. But what was lacking really was experience, and now they've had roughly 2 years with a similar inexperienced forward pack, and I think it's very smart what Bellamy's done, getting Welsh and Nas to take back steps in the team, because it's elevated these people to have more opportunity, and now they've got 2 years under experience of NRL under their belt, and they're only just improving. And if your stock standard is that, they're stock standard, but they're winning games every single week and they're currently top of the ladder, they're obviously good. So, it's only going to get better and better for them.
That's just it. Players like Trent Liero, who I think's been fantastic this season, Josh King, Tui Kamikamitha, maybe don't walk into any other club, but they're so integral to this Melbourne Storm system, and they're having fantastic seasons. Moving on to the Eels, mate. Look, as we said, very gutsy performance from them here. I really thought that the scoreline didn't reflect how good they were in this game, and especially with the names of the players that they're missing. I think they've got almost or maybe half their salary cap out on the sidelines, in the likes of Junior Paolo and, of course, most notably Mitch Moses not in this side. So no one gave them a chance. It was second last versus first. They came out. I thought they were really good. What do you find of the Eels this week?
I was so impressed. I was like, what the hell is going on here? And it was like, the first try, I was like, it's early in the game, who knows? And then he just kept putting the pressure on. Storm kept making mistakes. These guys kept capitalising. And then you sort of seen that the Eels started to fall off on the capitalisation, and you just cannot do that against top quality sides. As soon as you start to get an opportunity and you might fumble the ball or make a stupid error, and the morale comes down, the momentum dies, you now have to build up all that momentum you just struggled for again, and the Eels just aren't the side at the moment to be able to do that. So obviously the Storm capitalised, but Penasini impressed me. I thought with Moses gone, he's going to go back to being basically a shadow again, and he stood up, especially against Howarth. We talked about the Storm already, but Howarth has been impressive for me. He's a very strong runner of the ball. He's surely not a centre by by trade, probably be like an edge forward or something if I had to guess. And he's playing in the centres, but yeah, Will Penasini stepped up, but I liked that. I'm trying to think who else played really well. Dylan Brown, I think he did a good job at controlling the team without Moses there. You kind of come to expect that now with him. But yeah, Cartwright, Bryce Cartwright, actually, how could I forget Bryce Cartwright? He was super impressive in that game, just trying to get involved in everything. So they're probably my standouts.
Yeah, the Cardi Party was back in full swing, and it's so good to see him playing this sort of footy. He can play a great combination of tough and flashy, and that's something that I think has really evolved. It's something that I don't think Cardi would have really have gotten to if he didn't go through those low points in his career. So it was really good to see him playing the way he did. You mentioned Dylan Brown as well. I thought beyond the way he controlled the team, his defensive efforts, not just in this game but this season, anytime there's a break, you will constantly see in the bottom left of your screen, Dylan Brown is turned around and booking it to cover that tackle no matter who it is that's running away down the sideline. I thought you watch this game, every time that the Storm made a break, every single time there will be Dylan Brown chasing in cover. I thought he had some outstanding scramble defensive efforts.
Yeah. I love Dylan Brown as a player, to be honest. But a couple of years ago, I was shouting for people like, "You Sharks, get on him, get on Dylan Brown before he gets signed big and gets taken completely off the market," which I'm sure he probably is now. I'm not completely over the top of what his current contract is, but just thinking now, imagine a team with Nico Hines and Dylan Brown next to each other on each side of the field. But he's probably my favourite 5'8" in the NRL, even though he doesn't really have the success standard going for him at the moment. As you said, it's the effort areas. It's like what he does off the ball. It says a lot about who he is as a person within the team, and I think a lot of teams could really benefit from that. And he's quite young too, so love him.
That's just it. I remember the Warriors went quite hard at him a few years back, obviously to no avail. Lastly, the last player I wanted to give a bit of a shout out to from the Eels, Brendan Hands. I thought his service from dummy half in this game was absolutely fantastic. How quick he gets down the ground and past that ball, and it's spot on every time to the chest, right where the player needs it. You know, he's had a few lapses defensively throughout the season, and, you know, maybe even a couple in this game. And maybe he's not as electric around the ruck as a Harry Grant or Appy Coruscant, but he's got some of the best service you can find in a dummy half.
Yeah, completely agree. He needs to just be there, stock standard 80-minute. To be honest, that's what's the problem with the Eels for me, is that they die off. You've got people like Paulo in your team, Regan Campbell-Gillard. Like you can't expect those kind of players to be playing 60-plus minutes week in, week out. They need more forwards on the bench. You've got people like Luca Moretti, Wiramu Greg, a couple of other players that if you've got Lussick and Hands both in the team, or you've got two certified hookers both rotating, and for some reason the way the I thought it would change under Trent Barrett, but they always seem to just have that hooker on the bench that might even play 10 minutes and sometimes not even play at all. So they're literally using a 3-player rotation. You could drop Lussick, keep Hands for 80. You've got guaranteed good service for 80 minutes. Yeah, you don't have the electricity, but you've also got Moses and Brown in a fully fledged side on either side of the park. So you give them quick ball, good service, let them do all the electric stuff, and then you've got another forward on your bench as well where you can really keep that pressure going through the middle the whole 80 minutes.
That's just it, mate. And I think, you know, that's exactly when the Eels were at their best, when they had Reid Marnie. He didn't overplay his hand. He just gave phenomenal service when he was at the Eels, and they made it all the way to a grand final. It was interesting to know. I can't recall if the injuries or whatnot played a part, but Brendan Hands did play the full 80 in this game, and Joey Lussick did manage to get onto the field for 15 minutes. Now, I can't recall if they ended up pushing Hands into more of a lock forward role or Lussick into a lock forward role, or if there were injuries that played a part. But I think just seeing the fact that Hands was more than comfortable punching out that 80 means moving forward there has to be either another forward or a utility player on there. Maybe a Deja Nasi moves back there in an ideal world when they can, and, you know, maybe give Ethan Sanders some reps. I know he's off to Canberra next year, but they played some good footy when he was in the halves earlier this season.
Yeah, completely agree. They need to do something there. You can't have Lussick and Hands in the same team. even if you're going to throw Lussick on for 15, 20 and a hooker and then move hands back, like, what are you really doing there? It's like you're moving a certified hooker out of his position into a position he doesn't play to bring another hooker in that isn't as good, in my opinion. So 80-minute hooker hands, it needs to be that, and then get rid of the other hooker and throw someone in that can play more positions, like you said, utility, or take the Sharks route. Like, Sharks are, I think, if I had to have a guess off the top of my head, the only team in the comp that runs a 4-forward bench, and we have problems starting in games, but we always are strong through the middle for 80 minutes, and I think it's a fluctuation that a lot of teams aren't doing. So, maybe join that mold and have a 4-forward bench, or throw in a utility, like you said. I think Parramatta's more suited to a utility. It's utility side sort of player with like 2 props and maybe like someone that can play a bit of edge and mid or something. I don't know what they got to do, really. I just hope that they can get better, because Para doesn't look good down the bottom of the ladder. It just doesn't suit them.
No, that's just it, mate. They were a team I really thought would give the top 8 a crack this year, maybe even contend for a premiership. Hasn't worked out that way, but we'll move on from the Eels and the Storm into our next game of round 21. That, of course, being the Bulldogs and the Broncos. Bulldogs getting a incredible win here, something they very much needed. A lot of people doubting them, myself included, all season. There's no doubt in the Bulldogs now, is there, Jai?
No, not at all. And there was that narrative that was out a bit, like every 10 years or something. I'm not sure if you caught this, but it was like, I think it was in 2004, it started in 1994. They alternate winning a premiership and then losing it, alternate winning it, losing it. And 2024 just happened to be the year they're meant to be winning it again. And I was like, yeah, rightio, whatever. It's not going to happen at the start of the year. And they're in form at the right point of the season. And I'm not going to doubt them anymore for at least making finals. Like, they've 100% got their head in there. But I'm not going to say they're going to win the premiership, but they're definitely in the form of a team that could win it.
That's just it. Yeah, I think the narrative goes as the Bulldogs won the premiership in 84, lost the grand final in 94, won the premiership in 2004, lost the grand final in 2014. So there it all adds up for 2024 to be the year of the Doggies. And it's an easy narrative to say, like, oh yeah, so every 10th year you either win or you lose. But it's not just not winning the grand final. It's the fact that they make the grand final every 10th year and then lose it. So it's looking like it's adding up for the Doggies this season. And look, I don't personally think, I keep doubting them. I don't think they can, but I just look at their forward pack and the names that they have on there, but they just keep playing above their weight. Josh Curran in the middle has been a master stroke. They're doing this without Max King, who has been probably their best forward all season, at least their most consistent forward all season. And to have Josh Curran step up in that role, Sam Hughes just keeps getting through his work. I think he's been really underrated for the Doggies this year. I'm sure he was someone that everybody jumped on in the Supercoach world. Was he very much a household name in the fantasy world as well?
Yeah, Kingy. Kingy was that, sorry, specifically?
Sam Hughes.
Sam Hughes. Oh, yeah, Hughes, yeah. He was, I think Phil Gould gave him a shout in the start of the year, and he was like, oh, he's this year's Preston. And we're like, oh, well, I jumped on Preston at 230K last year, and he was a stud. So I was like, hey, let's just throw it on Hughes. And he just took a while to get going. He's always looked like he could get more minutes. And now with King injured, it was like, come on, let's go. In terms of fantasy, I wouldn't want to own him anymore. I traded him out a while ago. But in terms of just actual rugby league, he's a big body. He could definitely play more minutes than what he's playing. But I really think they're taking the long approach with him. Don't want to push him too early. Really just get some meters in the legs and some experience. So next year, I wouldn't be surprised if he features a lot more heavily in the side.
For sure, yeah, definitely wouldn't want to be owning him at the moment in the Supercoach world as well. I know there's a lot of people that still do, not necessarily rebought him, but just never could offload him throughout the season. And if you've still got him, maybe when depth comes and push comes to shove and you have to play him, he'll knock you out some points. But I was lucky to sort of cash in on him at a decent price early in the season. But from an NRL perspective, I think he has been great. You mentioned he could be playing a lot more minutes. I 100% agree. I think he's got the motor for that. But front row is probably the toughest position you can get through in a game of footy. So if to be a rookie coming into that Bulldog side and be going up against the best in the competition, yeah, you want to sort of limit his role and limit his minutes. I think the Bulldogs are doing a outstanding job of that.
I think you're 100% right. And I think it's a lot to do with Burton's boot. which is insane. Like, that's how they beat the Sharks. I think it was that last week before. I tend to forget the losses. And but yeah, Burton's boot is insane. Like, if they have bad go forward, or they can't really get out of their half, most of the time it's the backs that are making those runs. So the forwards are still trying to get back on side, and then you get a massive Burton boot that sends them straight back down into, like, sometimes it's inside the 20. Those forwards now aren't having to run as far back to get back into an attacking line to now chase a ball. It's kind of like the ball's down to where it would have been if we had a good running set. Now let's get defensive again, try and force an error, and then that seems to just be very, very good for them managing their tanks through a game, which I think is the only way to justify how that they're still operating with such a skeleton forward pack. Like, no Max King. They just keep getting injuries in the front row. Injuries everywhere. They got one of the smallest packs in the comp, but they're still, like, you got Josh Curran now. He can play prop, but he's not a prop, and he's just stepping in there and next man up. He's still doing a great job. So yeah, props to Burton, and his little sneaky pod that we're looking at in NRL Fantasy.
Now, there's a few people in my small circle in the Supercoach world who have been looking at Matt Burton as a bit of a cheeky pod to finish this season as well. So I'm glad to hear his name in the opposite end of the spectrum over in fantasy as well. Mate, the thing that impressed me about the Bulldogs this week is we know how good they are defensively. Currently the second best defensive team in the comp, I believe. But they came out with a game plan to absolutely rattle the Broncos in this one by shifting early. They identified that the Broncos, they can press off their kick chase. They have one of the best kicks in the NRL off Adam Reynolds. Knows the game plan really well, can turn the Bulldogs around. They pressure you down their own end, but they compress their defensive line when they do so. And the Bulldogs, they identified that that's exactly how the Broncos like to play. And they came in and they just constantly got back on side really quickly and just spread the ball wide and caught them out on the edges.
It was a masterclass by Ciraldo. That game made me realize, like, how intelligent he is as a coach. It's like one thing to notice it, but to coordinate the team to actually pull it off against someone like the Broncos, who are motivated to win games, to make the finals, just like you are. And it wasn't a close game. They made them look silly on the fringes, and it just kept happening and happening and happening. And then, the Bulldogs, what it looks like is they've kind of always had the names. They just haven't had the ability to kind of just justify the purchases. And, without Crichton this week, that pretty much made me certain that Broncos were going to win. They got no Crichton. They don't have their captain. They don't have the leadership. Broncos need it too. They're going to win. But then they throw it out to Carraz's wing and they start to dominate more on that right side. And you kind of forget about Carraz when they've got Crichton. And he's just dominant. And he's not the fastest centre, but he's very, very good at busting tackles or getting through the line and linking up, where his support plays insane. So, yeah, props to the Bulldogs, and special mention Cameron Ciraldo, absolute champion.
100%, mate. In terms of standouts, we've talked a lot about Connor Tracy already. We'll give him a quick little rub again here. Absolutely love Connor Tracy. He's such a good combination of tough, intelligent, and just skillful footballer. He gets through so much work. Considering he's a half coming through the grades, to him then being a utility to play whatever the Sharkies needed him when he was at your club, and now being a fantastic, one of the best fullbacks in the last few weeks, in my opinion, been really consistent, flying under the radar for the Bulldogs this season. But the man you mentioned, Jacob Kiraz, his versatility in that back line, I think, is something that is really underrated for the Bulldogs. I think underrated is something that gets thrown around a lot with the Bulldogs at the moment, is their versatility and how they just keep punching above their weight. Kiraz is one of those players for sure.
Yeah, he's got such a big dog in him that it kind of suits the Bulldogs, Like, I couldn't see Kiraz in any other team. It's just like the Bulldogs is him. He just looks like a dog, and every time he plays, he just is so. He's such a gritty player. He runs hard, and then when you've got someone like you mentioned there with Connor Tracy, it's like Connor Tracy kind of gives me vibes of Carmichael Hunt, like the way he approaches a run, and he just runs 100%, and he's a bit more fleet-footed, so he kind of looks for space, but when he's jammed or when he's got to make a decision, it's that no hesitation. And it seems to be like you could probably put that label on everyone in their backline at the moment, which I think is a really good quality to have. It just looks like the Dogs have adopted it's always been them. If you see it the same as me, they've always just had that real mongrel team, and they're always hard, they're in your face, and they're pulling it off at the end of this year. It's like, well, Reid Marnie's in your team. How can you not get in biffs and get in people's faces? But it's props to Karaz, props to Tracy. They've stepped up 100%. You can't take Tracy out of fullback anymore. Taff is reserve grade in my opinion.
I think you hit the nail on the head there once again, as you always do. Karaz, you mentioned him just being a Bulldog. I think 100%. I looked at their squad at the start of the year. Obviously, a team that has been made up a lot of high-profile signings, but the fact that you've got this Jacob Kiraz and you've got Jacob Preston, these two, they just feel like Bulldogs, and I love that they're currently the heart and soul of their side. Obviously, Reid Marnie probably is the actual heart and soul of their side, and he's a high-profile signing, but to me, sometimes I just forget he was an Eels player now because he's a Bulldog through and through to me.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Like you'd say he played for the Eels, and at the time he didn't look out of place. But now as soon as he's moved to the Dog, he's got that white headgear. He's reminding me of Ennis. It's like, oh, dude, you're not allowed to play for any other club anymore. You're a Doggy for life.
No, exactly right, and he's been so good this year. How about that little try-assist kick where he chipped it over the top, Kiraz takes it out of the air and finds Skelton on that wing?
Oh, mate, if you had a camera on me when that play was going on, I have Marnie and I have Karaz in my team, so I was cheering thinking, yes, because Marnie's kicked the ball over, he's going to get a try assist here, Karaz's going to go over, but Karaz's support play again just goes bang straight out. He could have gone over himself, but it's just like, take out the risk. Here you go, Skelton. And Karaz still gets the try assist. But it's just crazy how they can put those plays together, like on a whim. Was it a second kick? I think it was a second kick. I can't remember off the top of my head how the play eventuated, but just the way it came off was just a split decision, kick it cross field. Karaz, their support play. Skelton goes over. It was insane.
Yeah, that's it, mate. It was off that second kick, and the fact that they can just come up with these plays when they scramble and nothing gets to them at the moment, the Doggies. I think they're playing some amazing footy. Some other standouts, we mentioned Jacob Preston as one of those players that just feels like a Bulldog. He was phenomenal in this game again. Really good to see him back, being healthy and getting really good minutes in that side. Is he someone that you've ever looked at fantasy-wise this season?
Yes, but I have never owned him because he was playing off the bench, and I play the game of fantasy very much like I'm investing in a stock market, so that's kind of the perspective I had on Cleary this week. It's like a perspective I take on everyone. It's like, where's their value proposition? What's their break even? Or, could I get them at a better price? Is the score they're gonna get justify the value they're at now? Let's wait a little bit. And then every time that's happened, it's been like, oh, he's got injured. Okay, I'm not jumping on him yet. No, I'm not jumping on him yet. But that's forced him to be in fantasy. He's just, I think I don't have it in front of me, but I'm pretty sure he's just under 2.5% ownership. Huge pod. And you could easily, I'm going to go as far to say as you could anti-pod him against someone like David Fifita. Easily, in my opinion, with the Bulldogs' form at the moment. He features in everything, and his attack, the biggest thing about Jacob Preston that I love is his line running inside the opponent's 30 is insane. Like, I would say it's best in the comp. He is so good at off-the-ball movement. He'll drag the outside player, run a line towards the outside player and attract the outside player in. And every single time that inside player isn't across fast enough, watch him step off his foot straight into the hole. And every single time he's just, even if he gets tackled, he's got his hands free. So it's like, it's very, very difficult to defend against somebody like that. And I couldn't speak highly enough of Jacob Preston. I really, really like him.
100%, mate. Especially like when you consider the fact that this is only his second season. It's been very injury interrupted. He was thrust in the deep end, essentially their like go-to player, most consistent player in his debut season for a team coming right down the bottom of the ladder. He's come back this season where they're going all right, but he's been in and out with injury, and as soon as he gets back and he gets that big minute role, he's hitting some of those lines. For his experience and his age to be doing what he's doing, he's an absolute gun. I hope he carves out a fantastic career at the Bulldogs, and good shout on him on the pod market. A lot of people would know if they follow us on the Instagram that we very much market our Supercoach stuff around the pods. So Jacob Preston, he's a buy on, he's a pod for fantasy. We'll look at him as a pod for Supercoach as well, mate.
Awesome. Epic.
Lastly, the last Bulldogs player I wanted to touch on, I thought Toby Sexton was outstanding. Someone I thought should have been in the side from the very beginning this season. I know they brought Drew Hutchison over for experience, but Sexton, I thought last year he finished the season really good for the Bulldogs, and he was a great complementary player to Matt Burton. This season, I think since he got a shot, he's been really good. In this game, his kicks, the way he was the first to lead his kick chases and apply that pressure and tackle players in goal, thought he was really good. I've been really impressed with Toby Sexton as of late. But, mate, let's move into the Broncos. What's next for them?
I don't know what they're going to do, especially because, to me, a lot of what you can tell a lot about a team by the mentality of the coach. And not that, like, this isn't a knock on Kevy. He is a great personality. I think he's got a great energy. He's a great person to lead the Broncos in their club. But the consistent narrative that he keeps speculating about, keeps popping up in news, is he's blaming Origin for the reason why his team's falling off. And it's like, how can you have some coaches that say Origin affects them negatively, and then a majority of coaches saying how positive it is for their team? I think the problem is with the Broncos is that Adam Reynolds is not in that team consistently enough. He's constantly injured. They have to redo rotations. Then when people go and play Origin, that kind of amplifies it. It's not Origin's fault. I think that there's a bit of a culture problem there. And to be honest, I'm really worried it's not going to get better with them trying to sign Ben Teo and Trent Barrett as assistant coaches for 2025. Trent Barrett's with the Eels right now, and they're not doing too good. And he was with the Bulldogs. They weren't doing too good. Panthers offloaded him for a reason, and now they've won 3
before that as well, and no success there.
It just keeps coming. So look, I think that I would go as far to say is the only game I'm certain the Broncos are going to win on the run home is the bye. I'm not all the rest of them. I'm like, I'm not going to tip. Like, they lost to the Titans earlier in the year, and I'm pretty sure that's who they're versing this week. And Titans are hot, Broncos are cold. I'm gonna tip Titans this week, 100%.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's just it, mate. I've been very high on the Broncos all season. They've had in and out of games, whether or not it's the Origin stuff or it's Adam Reynolds being down. And I think Adam Reynolds is the most important player to their team. Reece Walsh is the superstar. Paddy Carrigan is one of my absolute favourites, and the captain, Payne Haas, a weapon. But without Adam Reynolds, I just feel like nothing else matters. And you can contribute a few losses in that period to being without him. But to have him back in this game, to have all their Origin stars back in a must-win game, essentially playing for this season, and to go down the way that they did. Of course, Bulldogs no pushover, but this was in Suncorp as well, and to let this happen is inexcusable. And the fact that you can, like, Origin's been and gone, it's well in the past now, and to still put the narrative on Origin is baffling to me. Obviously, it is tough to lose your players, but that's what happens with Origin. You're not the only club to lose them. Cowboys, they lose essentially their entire squad, and their players that they bring up have that next man up mentality, and they do a fantastic job, and you never see them or Todd Payton really blaming Origin for that. So it's a bit of a worrying time for the Broncos.
I think so too, and you'll see most coaches that are in support of Origin players see it as an opportunity to give fringe players more experience. So it's like, you're losing your Origin player, but while the Origin player is gone and exposing themselves to high-level rep footy, building that confidence and then bringing that back to the club, like that integrity back to the club, it always tends to make teams better. You're also giving experience to up-and-comers to amplify their presence within the team. So you'd see most teams, when their Origin stars come back, look at the Panthers. Panthers just dominated the Dragons. We'll probably obviously get to that, but it's just, I just don't see how the narrative is that, you can blame Origin in a negative way. Nothing but positivity comes out in the run home for teams, except after Origin. Like, that's, in my opinion, and it's something else going on. There's other things that aren't being focused on enough that I think are holding the Broncos back at the moment.
No, 100%, mate. And I really wonder what they are. For them to be a grand final, a whisker away from winning a grand final last year, I thought they'd just solidify themselves again. Of course, they lost players along the way. Herbie and Tom Flegler are big losses, but I don't think those two players being out really quantify the performances that the Broncos have been putting out this season consistently, or inconsistently, I should say. So It really is. It begs to question what is really going on there and how they've gotten to this. I'm not sure if it is a Kevy Walters problem. I don't like the narrative he's spinning about it being Origin affected and this is why they're going bad. Whether or not he's the coach to lead them, I'm not too sure. I don't know the ins and outs of the club, but he's still someone who got them to the Premiership last season. So I just thought in a game that their season's essentially on the line. They need to win this game. It's at home. Everyone's back. Reynolds, Walsh, Carrigan, Haas. This is it. They turn it on here, and they not only knock off the Bulldogs, but they do it enthusiastically. I invested pretty heavily in Broncos for the run home too. I've antipoded in Supercoach. I've antipoded Tedesco and Trebojevic to go for Reece Walsh and Kalen Ponga next week for his run home. So to see this sort of performance by them has me a bit worried that Reece Walsh and the Broncos aren't going to be what I thought they would be for the rest of the way home, and that's got me a little bit worried there.
Yeah, I could see why you'd be a bit worried with that. Look, I would be lying if I wasn't high on Reece Walsh. Like, for fantasy, he's too much like a Pappenhausen for fantasy. It's like, he scores well when he scores tries, but if he doesn't score tries, his floor is just not there. But at his price point, it was like, hey, dude, Broncos need to win. It's the same reason why we picked Daly Cherry Evans, and it was just like, well, if Manly are going to make finals, he needs to be centre field and take the stage. And he's been doing that, obviously. Well, not so much last week, but this week he did. And I expected the same for the Broncos, but luckily I was like, nah, you know what? I'm going to go a different direction right before the run home. And the only Bronco I've got at the moment is Payne Haas. And, he's stock standard, always a gun. So,
yeah, Payne's probably still someone I'll look to bring in. I still think the Broncos, whether or not they make finals now, I'm really not sure. But that one has got me quite concerned. I think Payne Haas will be a good option, fantasy and Supercoach wise, regardless. But back to this game, mate. I thought Katoni Staggs in this game was actually quite good for the Broncos this season. I think he's been quite inconsistent. Someone that we know the ceiling of him. We know how good he can go, but it's almost as if the attitude hadn't been there, but I thought he brought a real good attitude into this game. There were a lot of times that he showed Bronson Xerri when the Bulldogs were spinning the ball quite early out of their own end, and Bronson Xerri with his speed was getting onto the outside, and Katoni didn't let that rattle him. He'd just give him the outside and just round him up, which was fantastic. I thought he was really, really good defensively, and that solo try he scored right on the brink of halftime was it. Only Katoni Staggs can score that.
Yeah, 3 missed tackles in a sprint down the sideline where he has like a metre to move. And it was like, that was probably the only Bulldogs really, really big red flag. Was like, you just missed 7 tackles in one play and they just scored a length of field try in halftime. It's like, oh crap, what's going to happen in the second half? But Katoni Staggs, as you said, his only issue is consistency. It's like when you are on, you are arguably the best center in the NRL, and it's just like if you can just put those performances together week after week after week, he'd just be slapped in every Origin side every year. And there's a reason he's not, because you never know what you're going to get. But it seems to be when he gets in those dogfights, it's when the best comes out of him.
100%. In stark contrast to Staggs in this one, though, Selwyn Cobbo, I thought was really, really poor. We talk about the attitude of Staggs and how he brought that into this game. Selwyn, his attitude was non-existent. He wasn't chasing back. The one that really stood out to me was, of course, on that chip that Reid Marnie put over to Jacob Kiraz, which, of course, is off-the-cuff sort of footy. But when Kiraz took that ball, the only person standing in his way is Selwyn Cobbo. And I kid you not, he didn't move a muscle. His feet didn't move. His arms didn't move. He stood still. Katoni Staggs Jacob Kiraz didn't even need to pass if he didn't want to. He could just ran it because Selwyn wasn't even moving. So quite worrying stuff. And of course, I'm not sure if you've heard sort of the stuff that's come out about him today, which I don't really want to get into. We'll leave that for what's coming. But yeah, I thought he was really poor in this game, Selwyn Cobbo.
Yeah, and he supposedly jarred his fingers earlier in the game. And I've always had this feeling about Selwyn Cobbo. It's kind of the reason why I don't like him as a centre. He's more of like just a permanent winger. You can't really do anything else except profit off good attack, because he just has this lackluster approach, which is probably part of his personality. And, I don't know him outside of footy. He's probably a pretty calm, genuine dude. But just that kind of, he always kind of looks like he's just like cruising out there. Like nothing's really too urgent. And in situations like that, where you've got a Carraz that's just about to take a crossfield kick and you're standing there fleet-footed, like you should be in front of him. Like, what are you doing, chasing him down? There is no urgency in his game. And look, you could put that down to him just carrying a hand injury in that game with the jarred fingers or whatever it was. But it seems to be something so minuscule that how could you really attribute it to that? I just think that he's got something going on at the moment and he needs some time away from the game.
Oh, for sure. As you said, I mean, jarred fingers is a load of crap of an injury. We've all had jarred fingers playing basketball or footy or whatnot. Like, it's painful, but it's not going to stop you from doing a whole lot. But yeah, as you said, probably a fair few things going on outside of footy, especially with the news that breaks today. So, as I said, won't touch into that one, but in terms of how his performance was, I thought he was really poor. Mate, for the rest of the Broncos, was there anyone that really stood out for you?
Blake Moser, he needs to be the hooker. Sorry, Walters, I know it's your kid, but he needs to go to the bench and just be utility, because that Moser he's the best hooker in their team. And I don't know, I'm pretty sure it was him getting raps about being the next Cameron Smith, which is like, yeah, Cameron Smith is the GOAT of NRL. And if you're getting raps, it's like, okay, well, maybe just give this guy a crack. And I guess they're blooding him, and he's played a bit of reserve grade now, and he's getting his chance off the bench in first grade. But that's only, I think this was his first proper game off the bench, actually beating Tyson Smoothie out of the starting 17. So, maybe they're going to give him some more time off the bench. But I think at least from next season, he needs to be stock standard in hooker. And from a fantasy perspective, that's probably why there's a lot of pressure coming here right now from it, is because I want him in my side in 2025. So, yeah, put him in hooker, please, Kevy.
Mate, I'm in the same boat as you with that. I think Billy Walters has done a really good job there transitioning from a half into that hooking role, and he's had some great moments this season, but I think he is versatile, knowing the fact that he can play in the halves. Ideally, he will make a great 14, and Blake Moser is an out-and-out hooker and one of the best young hookers we've seen in a long time. I haven't heard this much about a hooker since probably Harry Grant, maybe even Wade Egan before that had a lot of raps on him. But even then, the stuff that's coming out about Blake Moser is he is the next biggest superstar we've got. So I think, they've done a decent job of blooding him slowly. He's quite young and there's raps and expectations on him. I do think next season has to be like now. Get him in, make him that starting hooker. Doesn't have to play 80 minutes a game. Harry Grant wasn't doing it at the start of his career. Harry Grant got loaned to the Tigers at the start of his career. But for that development, he's had that time coming off the bench. He's had that time playing in reserve grade against people above his age. Next season is the time for him at starting hooker, in my opinion, because he is an absolute superstar of the future, Blake Moser.
Couldn't agree more. He needs it. And I think, like you said there, maybe he's a little bit of an introduction on the run home. I think that they'll, it's very likely that they'll keep the situation as it is until they have a guarantee that they're not going to make finals. But if they get another loss or whatever, and they're no chance of making finals, you're not going to lose by giving him 60 minutes a game at hooker and kind of getting him used to that longer-term performance so that he can have a bit of experience, go into the off-season and the pre-season, and then really step into that 80-minute role, or even if it's 60-minute role, and then Walters comes in and plays a little bit in different positions on the field. But yeah, he needs to be there, 100%.
100%, mate. Beyond that, for the Broncos, Paddy Carrigan and Payne Haas up to their usual stuff. 175 metres, 37 tackles from Paddy Carrigan. Payne Haas, 33 of his own, as well as 131 running metres. And the last man I wanted to give a shout-out to, Martin Tapau, scoring a try in his 250th game off the bench. I thought he's been really good this season when he's actually been given chances. I couldn't understand why they started with him at the beginning of the season, then dropped him off the side and picked players like Fletcher Baker and there's another player that they were picking above him. I'm all for Xavier Willison in the team, but I thought Marty Tapau, I like his impact. I think he's still got a bit to give in an experienced role, whether it's at the Broncos or at another club, but I thought it was really good to see him get a try in his 250th match.
Yeah, I loved it. Had a big bow and arrow into the crowd for his Try July celebration. It probably wasn't even an arrow. It was probably a bloody big stone log or something, the way he looked. massive, but far out. Yeah, I love Marty Tapau. He was around and prominent when I was in high school playing fantasy, and I was just like, oh, I loved having him in my team. It was a bit like a Andrew Fafita back in the day. He might get a 30 odd in some games, but he was that guy that could just bust tackles, turnovers, and all the rest of it. And yeah, obviously he's faded off a little bit from his prime, but as you said, he could go to any club and kind of play that Aaron Woods style role, towards the end of his career, where he's just really there for leadership and guide teams around the park. I just really hope the Tigers don't do an investment into him. I don't think he's the right fit for the Tigers. Tigers really need different players. But yeah, if he doesn't stay with the Broncos, he could definitely survive elsewhere for a few more years.
100%. I think he's still got a bit to give the game, even beyond an experience role. I think he can nab a spot off the bench and do some good things. Big things about Marty Tapau, there's a few moments that stand out to me. Would have been his junior Kiwis performance where he ran down Dane Gagai, who playing for the Kangaroos. Dane Gagai break down that left-hand side and Marty Tapau, the front row, rounded him up. And beyond that, always stood out to me was playing for the Tigers when he put that massive fend right into the chest of Alex Johnston and left him for dead. So love those parts about Marty Tapau. Hopefully he can get another run around next season. But that's sort of all that really stood out to me for the Broncos. There weren't too many. I mean, Adam Reynolds done his usual business at kicking, but yeah, not their best game, unfortunately, the Broncos.
Yeah, I agree. Hopefully they can do better just from a general viewership perspective. But look, I'm also a New South Welshman, and one of my mates is a very vocal Broncos fan, and I can't stand it. So it's like, hey, when they get smashed or when they get good, it's like, get on the blower. Sucked in, mate. So yeah, look, I like the Broncos, but I also don't like them at the same time.
Well, I'm sure you're not going to like the club we're talking about next either, because up next we do have the Cowboys defeating the Cronulla Sharkies. Your Sharkies, mate. Talk us through this game.
Dude, it's just hard. I'm not going to blame anything to do with their situation, because to be completely honest, Braden Trindle and Daniel Atkinson are more than capable of putting it to a Cowboys side and taking out a win. I think we don't need Nicho Hynes necessarily against a team like that, and Nicho Hynes wasn't in form when he was playing before his injury anyway, so the halves isn't an issue for me personally, especially with their halves being Dearden and Townsend. It's like, yeah, they're top quality, but Townsend's never been a superstar. It's kind of why we got rid of him when he played with the Sharkies back in the day. But for me, okay, outside backs were okay. That's kind of been our strong point all year, is our kick returns, but it's just our errors in our own half that we can't seem to really just get out of the habit of, and not really starting from the first minute of the game, but rather the 20th minute of the game, and then we're always playing from the back foot. I don't know how we fix that. I know every press conference, Craig Fitzgibbon's been talking about it. They're saying they're working on it, and I can give credit to the fact that it is improving. They're not just leaving it to the last 40 minutes and winning by 2 points anymore. Like they're kind of putting it closer and closer together. But in a way, I'm sort of happy that this is happening now, because once they get to finals, hopefully that's when they hit that next streak of form and we can actually make it through a win in a final series instead of getting knocked out into straight sets again. So look, I think we've got a lot of improvement to make, but I love that we have a 4-forward bench. I'd argue that our forward pack is probably the most dominant in the competition over an 80-minute period. It's just that we can't seem to capitalise on our meters. And I might be biased as well in my explanation of it, but when you put the Sharks team and the elements I've just put down, like, in perspective, it's like, okay, well, we've kind of got arguably one of the best kick returns in the competition with our back three or back five. And we're getting the meters up the field, and then we've got a 4-forward bench with a pretty dominant forward pack. You could start some of our bench forwards in other teams. So it's like we've got a dominant team and we're strong up the middle, but then it's like, how are we not winning? And I think it's a lot to do with capitalization, errors at the wrong times, not being able to take advantage of momentum. And I don't know how you fix those things. It's not culture, because Craig Fitzgibbon's an amazing coach, but I think it's not really experience either. I just think that there's maybe just strategical differences they need to make, and it's just a bit more up in here, stay switched on. It's more the players, this one, not necessarily the coach.
The old up in here gesture is going to look really good when it's just an audio podcast. But no, they are in a really unique situation, the Sharkies. We mentioned them a few times on our podcast throughout the year that they are the only sort of side that does that 4-forward bench rotation, or at least fully goes into that. A lot of players might have teams might have for instance, Warriors might just run a Jazz Tavanga on the bench, but he can cover hooker. Well, the Sharkies really are sitting there with just middle forwards essentially on their bench. You've got Toby Rudolph, Oregon Kaufusi, Tom Hazelton, Braden Hamlin-Uele, Royce Hunt. These are essentially regular starters, or at least off the bench in this Sharkies side. And, even before that, Dale Finucane, another middle forward before he retired during the early parts of the season. I think a lot of teams can take a lot out of that as well. You mentioned that the Eels should delve into that sort of play. I think I 100% agree with it. I don't think that this whole you have to have a utility on the bench is a necessity in the NRL. I think you can play around with what the Sharks do here and have a Blake. Blake Brayley's essentially not missed a game since he debuted, and he's one of the only 80-minute hookers out there. Sure, a utility player is going to come in handy when you have games when you go down and an injury in the outside backs or the halves. But with the utility that you have in CSF Talakai, Daniel Atkinson, who can play essentially anywhere in your back line and halves as well, the Sharkies are pretty good with that, even if Blake Brayley was in the likely event of him going down. Cameron McInnes has done a lot of time at hooker. You have that there. The question I want to pose to you is, with Addin Fanua-Blake coming to the club, there's no room for all of these forwards. And if there is, even if there are, Fanua-Blake, you'd assume, is going to be punching out a lot more metres than the sort of almost split down the middle 40-minute rotations that Craig Fitzgibbon is doing with his current front rowers. Who misses out? Who, in your ideal world, which Sharkies front rowers are let go?
I think in terms of let go from the starting side, I would say Braden Hamlin-Uele is probably on the chopping block to get pushed into reserve grade. It's probably why he's got shown interest from other clubs as well. Same with Royce Hunt. In saying that, look, I would love to keep them both. I think Royce Hunt is a little bit more durable. Braden Hamlin-Uele seems to be a bit more susceptible to injuries, so I think they'd be the two players on the chopping block for me. I think with Tom Hazelton needs to stay. He's got that great Sharks culture fit. I'm just trying to think of other people. We've got Oregon Kaufusi. Oh, look, he's kind of getting towards the end of his career. I would prefer to probably keep maybe Royce Hunt or Hamlin-Uele over him. But I think that's the benefit there, is it's not so much who would I want to keep, it's that it doesn't really matter who we lose. I think we're going to be satisfied. But as you said, we can't buy Addin Fanua-Blake for 800, 900k a season, whatever we've got him for. I think it's less than that.
I think it's more than that.
Oh, really?
I think it could be $1 to $1.1 million a season.
Look, I wouldn't be surprised. That's what the top tier props are going for. So I would not be
salary cap. I don't hate it for Addin.
Yeah, they can't play him for less than 60 minutes. So no. I think they're nearly playing the same way they do at the Warriors typically. They didn't do it last week, but it's like that 25 to 30 minute start, a pretty long starting stint, and then they bring him on in for the last 25 minutes. And he's dominant at the start of a game against teams kind of getting how many tries has he scored for the Wars in the first 20 minutes of a game, just real close to the line. So I think I'd love to see him there starting in that kind of fashion, and then coming in late in the game. He's pretty much like a Royce Hunt, but with a way bigger motor and a bit more dynamic in attack. So as much as I'd like to keep both of them, if I had to pick one, it's pretty obvious who you'd keep. So look, I'm just stoked that next year we've got Addin Fanua-Blake, I just think that there's nothing really wrong with the Sharks because we're not losing anyone of top tier caliber and not really going anywhere. We've literally just got Addin Fanua-Blake walking in, and then we've got re-signings and stuff to do next year. But the last 2 years have been any indicator. Craig Fitzgibbon barely looks to even sign externally. It's who do we really want in this club? Where's our future going? Spends all his money on what he's got in the club, and then is kind of bit of a feeler out in the future to see who could potentially be the fit. Who are we targeting? leaves a bit of salary cap aside, and then might tap for players on the shoulder to get one player in. But it's not these massive movements. It's just a general growth. And that's another thing. How many times have you seen in the Cronulla Sharks bloody premiership time that they've been able to attract names like Nico Hines and Adam Fanua-Blake? You know, we've always had pretty much homegrown talent or subpar kind of players that have turned themselves into greats. So it's good to see that we can now pull that kind of attention from other clubs.
No, I do think the Sharkies are in a good way with that, and I'm absolutely devastated to lose him as a WA supporter. I know we get James Fisher-Harris, and there's not many other players I'd like to have, but with what Adam brings and his try scoring and whatnot, it's very hard to replace that, even with what James Fisher-Harris brings, mate. It's a bold take of yours to say Oregon Kaufusi, the 24-year-old, is winding down towards the end of his career.
I was thinking of someone else when I said it. I think it's funny that you said that, because when I said it, I was like, I think I've stuffed up there in my head.
Yeah, no, I did a quick look. I'm like, hang on, have I got it wrong? I saw he's a younger. No, look, personally, I do think whether or not he's winding towards the end of his career or not, I think he might be the best sort of man to make way. Hamlin Uele re-signed earlier this year after the Warriors chased him with big money. So obviously there's still a bit of love with the Sharks there if he can stay healthy. I think in this game in particular, he was really good when he scrambled that loose ball and made that try for, I can't recall who the try was for. I'm sure you know better than me, but he's had a drop ball out the back and he just picked it up and just sprinted straight towards the posts, got an offload away. I'm going to have to find it. But I thought he was really good there. And obviously, yeah, the Sharkies must love him a lot to re-sign him. I think it was on a 2-year deal, obviously on a lot less money than the Warriors threw at him. Royce Hunt also being shopped, maybe not shopped around, but a lot of interest being shown in him. So I think, to me, I think it was Kale Iro's try, maybe. Yeah, it would have been Kale Iro's try where Hamlin Uele picked the ball up and it was a bit of scramble, came out to Iro and he found that space there. But I'd like to see Hamlin Uele on your bench. I think in a shorter stint, if he's healthy, he can provide a lot of great impact. The other one there that we didn't really mention is Toby Rudolph. Now, recently, I think he hasn't had the best season. I've been a big Toby Rudolph fan since he was coming through the grades, even in New South Wales Cup for the Jets. I thought he was good. I thought this week he was really good off the bench. Got through big minutes, Toby Rudolph, and really aggressive with the way he runs.
Yeah, I think Toby Rudolph's a great player. I don't know, he's kind of in that awkward stage where it's like he's got that pedigree. He's not really in form, where you kind of got to take him for a little bit longer to make a final decision. So, you're kind of forced into holding him. I would hold him if I was a coach. It's like, nah, keep him for another season, give him a chance to prove himself. And if he plays bad next year, he needs to go. That would be my opinion. But, yeah. Well, I don't know. He's a hard one. I'm not even upset that he doesn't even make the side sometimes at the moment. He's just really not showing that form.
The other thing with Toby Rudolph as well is he is a bit more like, he was a more experienced player when he made his debut. I think he might have been 25 when he or maybe 24, which is a little bit later in your career to make his debut. So he's got a bit more experience than others playing in New South Wales Cup. I don't think he'd be asking for big coin from many other clubs. I think he loves the Sharks culture and what they're building there. So you could sign him on cheap. He's a quality player that when he does get his chances, he's doing pretty well. And it's good competition for spots. I think there's a thing that we mentioned last week on the Ruck Infringement podcast was that I can't remember what team it was, but they didn't really seem to have that the Knights. I don't think the Knights have that pressure, that depth in their squad that really challenges the players who are underperforming to really step up. Otherwise, you're going to get dropped. I don't think they have that. While the Sharkies, if you were to have Toby Rudolph and he's not in your squad, he's definitely going to be pushing them and challenging for that. So he's definitely someone that I think has a good little role in that Sharks side in the future. Tom Hazelton, been fantastic. Cult hero for the Sharkies this season. Thought this game wasn't his best, unfortunately, for Big Tommy. Yeah,
nah, it's just a down game. That's all I'd put it to. You can tell by his character. He had one of these earlier in the season. I can't remember who exactly it was against, but you can just see on his mannerisms that he gets really disappointed in himself, and he makes that effort even in the next play or the next run to try and do a little bit better. And it didn't all come together for him this game, but I can guarantee you next week he's just going to come out, even if he play off the bench, and he'll come out with something pretty great. So I don't know. I'm probably biased. I just love him. I just love how he puts tape around his head and he's got no hair. I just think you're an absolute weapon. Love Tommy Hazleton.
And he's new wave Marco Mealy. Absolutely love him as well. A few other standouts for the Sharkies in this game. Kale Iro, he has been very consistent all year with his carries and defensive work, but a lot of people sort of expected him to come out and just really be a highlights reel sort of player. No, he hasn't been. He's really got through the tough stuff now towards the back end of the season. I've always argued that if you're getting through the tough stuff, then the highlight reel and the attacking stuff just comes to you as the season goes on or as the game goes on. The last few weeks, and especially in this game, really been coming to him.
Yeah, absolutely. I love Kale Iro. I was calling for this last year for Talakai to move onto the bench and for Iro to get a starting spot, or at least give him that at some points in the season to give him experience. And Fitzy just pulled the trigger on it this year, and testament to the Sharks culture. If you've heard Talakai talk about it, he's been quizzed about it in press conferences, and he's just like, I'm more than happy to do it. He goes, I'm doing what's best for the team, which has opened the door for Iro. And his hard work is definitely there. He needs to improve in his defense a little bit, in my opinion. He's great in defense, but he's just not consistent. Not so much with his tackling, it's just his positioning. It kind of puts the inside and outside defenders in two minds. So it's like, but when he's got the ball in his hand, he's dominant. He can break tackles. He can offload the ball. He's not afraid to attack the line. He kind of reminds me of Valentine Holmes when Valentine Holmes was young. So
looks
I'm just
like
hoping
him as well. Good looking rooster he is.
Does, eh?
His centre partner, though, obviously came off with a bit of a HIA for 15 minutes in this game. I look back at the stats. Jesse Ramian still ran for over 150 metres from 18 runs. It might have been even more than that in 65 minutes on the field. I get the stats up. He has been an absolute fan favourite of mine, Jesse Ramian. You talk about pods this season. He's someone that we jumped on. 150 metres from 18 runs, Jesse Ramian. We jumped on Ramian to start the season, just believing in his base and what he could just achieve, and thinking, Sharks, great attacking side, he'll get some attacking stats come his way. Hardly had any attacking stats come his way this season, but his base has been astronomical.
Yeah, he was thrown around in the Origin conversation this year, and people were like, "What the hell?" In like my groups and my circles, like, "Oh, how the hell's Ramian?" And I'm like, "Oh, mate, if you're not a Sharkies fan, so you don't watch him as closely as me, but he's definitely reliable and dominant in like a center perspective with base stats. He runs the ball. He's not shy of running the ball, and he has that ability." Similar to Karaz in a way. He's a bit more dynamic, in my opinion, than Karaz overall as a player, but he just has the ability to break the line, get the hand free. He's not afraid to get in amongst it and get niggle. And he's just got that. He's got X factor. There's something about when Ramian gets the ball in his hands, he attracts attention. So yeah, I love him, Ramian personally. I'm not in the market for a center in fantasy. I've already got all that covered. But I'd not be afraid to take a punt on him.
No, even to have him in Supercoach since day one of the only players I've held from literally before the season started to now. I won't sell him. I'm a massive Jesse Ramian fan. I tend to get on him at random points of seasons as well. I'll always own him at some stage. This season, I'm like, you know what? I want a bit of base in my centre wing to start the season. I'm like, I'll just take Ramian from the start. I think I'm going to do it every season. I've grown to absolutely adore him. But beyond his Supercoach and fantasy implications, I love what he's bringing to the Sharkies. He is a bit more stark contrast to Kale Iro. His defence, I think, is one of the best in the NRL. He's so strong in contact, really good position wise, has the pace that he can cover if they get to his outside most of the time as well. So really love what he's been doing this season. Beyond him, your wingers been very good for you all season. What do you think of your wingers in Sione Katoa and Ronaldo Mulitalo?
Can't knock them. I think they've been really great, both of them. I just don't really like the consistency of Sione Katoa. That's probably my only knock, and that's probably just because I've been a Sharks fan, obviously, my whole life, and I've seen a lot of him, and I really wanted Iro to take his spot last year, and then I really thought Iro should take his spot this year. But now Iro's in the team. Katoa he's got a knack for scoring tries. I don't know. He's got good defense too, surprisingly, for a winger of his stature, and he's not afraid to bust tackles. Like, he seems to find a good way to get out of getting tackled as well. But I don't know, it's just he sometimes has bad hands close to the line, or a ball will go up in the air and he jumps for it and drops it. And like, he's a big reason for errors in our own half. So, if Sharks want to fix that, I think seriously they need to consider maybe just pushing someone else into his place for a couple of weeks and make him fight back for that spot.
Do you guys really have the depth for that? Obviously, a lot of raps on Samuel Stone Street coming through the grades. He's injured at the moment, Sam Stone Street?
Yeah, if he's injured, I think they've got two options, but they're not great options. So you could put Daniel Atkinson out there, and then you got to try and find someone to put in the halves, or you could maybe give Ison a shout out there now when Will Kennedy comes back next week. I don't know. They've got options, but if you were looking at the team as if you'd pick one of them over Katoa. So Katoa's obviously going to hold the spot, but maybe that could be like a market we need to search in, a bit more competition in that role. But yeah, I don't know. You look at the Sharks wingers, and I'd say you could probably put Mulatalo up there with one of the most consistent wingers. He's obviously not the best in the market, but he's definitely not the worst. But like Katoa, for me, it's just kind of like I feel like he's just below par, and want him to kind of step up. I hope he doesn't listen to this, to be honest, because I think he's a bloke, a really good bloke. But yeah, I want to see improvement.
I find it really interesting listening into different circles of fan groups. Like from an outside perspective, I'm a Sione Katoa fan. Yeah, I think having depth in that position to push him would be really good. He is prone to a few brain snaps or below par performances, but I've always found him to be quite a good player. But it's always really interesting to hear another fan's perspective who watch their team's games closer than, say, I do from an outside perspective and having this inside knowledge. Beyond that, before we actually touch on the Cowboys, who were the winners, and we should spend a little bit of time on them, I want to touch on the long-awaited debut of Jayden Barrell and the debut of Liam Ison as well.
Ison was brilliant. I think for his first time in a fullback role in the NRL against the Cowboys, he did enough. It's just like great work, like good experience. He's obviously not going to keep a spot in the team, but for him to, again, it's that bit of test that Craig Fitzgibbon likes to give those rookies, where it's like, hey, well, look, here's an opportunity for a youngster to step up. Let's throw him in and see how he goes. And he did great. It's going to be great for his experience. He'll go back to reserve grade now and hopefully keep it pumping. Kennedy's I wouldn't say he's on the chopping block anywhere near it, but he's not like a Tedesco. It's not like you're never going to knock him out of his spot. If you impress enough, put pressure on his position, it's only going to make everyone better. But Barrell, oh man, I can't tell you how happy I was to see that bloke get a chance. He's been pushing so hard to get into that first grade team, and he finally got a chance off the bench. And if I've watched interviews and stuff with him, he's a great bloke. I was just stoked to see him get a chance. I don't know how long he'll stay there for. I don't think he'll be back in the team next week, but yeah, it was a good performance by him anyway for the 15 minutes, 20 minutes he played.
Yeah, Barrell, it has been long awaited. It's really good to see. I thought it might have been a Brayley injury in training or something when the announcement was named, but just hard work. He deserved that shot. It's almost unfortunate that young is a bit older now, but when he was signed to the club, Jayden Barrell, it was like, yeah, he'll be depth, but he'll get a debut. He'll get a few games, maybe origin period. Who knows? No, Blake Brayley has not missed a game of footy, and Jayden Barrell has just been kicking away. Really good to see him get his debut. I thought he did some good things in his time on the field as well. Liam Ison, the other one you mentioned, really young player. Obviously, a year or two ago, the next big thing for the Sharkies was Cade Dykes coming through. Now, I think he went down and get injured again this season, did he?
Yeah, ACL, I'm pretty sure it was. Gone for the year, yeah. So it's unfortunate. Similar stuff to Will Kennedy. Injuries really just affected them at key points of their career. So Dykes has got heritage too with the Sharkies. I would really hate for them to let him go, but at the same time, he's probably not taking up that much salary to put any pressure on them to move him, but he is definitely standing in the way of these younger guys coming up.
Yeah, really unfortunate stuff for Cade Dykes. I hope they, sign him on for another couple seasons. The thing about Cade is if these ACL injuries have done too much to his speed and stuff, he's very prominent in the halves as well, has a really good game for a 5'8", a modern-day 5'8", in my opinion. And, as you said, family ties with the Sharks in there. So hopefully they can keep him around and he can come back strong. But Liam Ison, he was incredible in his debut. I'm not sure if he has the size necessary for a wing position, if he's really going to be putting pressure on Sione Katoa, but really loved what he brought, the energy and enthusiasm he brought to the Sharkies in this game. Mate, let's move over to the Cowboys, the actual winners of this one. I thought it was a incredibly gutsy effort for them to do this one after losing Taumalolo 10 minutes in and then Cotter 15 minutes into the game, to lose their two starting front rowers, their big middle forwards, and to go on and do this against that Sharks pack. I thought it was an outstanding effort from the Cowboys.
That was what was so impressive to me. You lost Hilum Lukey in the lead up to the game. Then you've lost Cotter with a HIA. You lose Taumalolo for a cheekbone fracture or something they're rumoured to be. And they still put it together. I think Dearden didn't score too well in fantasy, but he seemed to just be so prominent in the reason why they did well. Look, Holmes stood up as well. I like watching Holmes play, and felt he absolutely killed it. Like, I couldn't knock the Cowboys, and even though they're Queensland team, I have soft spots for him. One of my good mates at school went for him, and he's quite a humble bloke, so I was just like, I hope they win. So, I don't want them to ever beat my team, but I think they did. It showed a lot about what they're capable of in the run home, and I think it's good signs for them to know that they can put together a strong performance without all their team on the park.
100%, mate, because the Sharkies, they weren't actually bad by any stretch of the imagination in this game. I thought the Sharkies were quite committed. Yeah, they probably let in a few tries that they probably shouldn't have, or at different points of this season they weren't letting in, but they kept clawing their way back and kept fighting, and the Cowboys just kept turning him away. So I thought it was a really, really gutsy effort from the Cowboys, especially, as you said, sort of been in and out, in touch with the 8 all season, the Cowboys. Not too consistent. Last year when they hit the origin period, they really went on a bit of a run. It's happened again this season, so it makes you wonder. It takes us back to what we said about the Broncos blaming the origin period. For the Cowboys, it always just seems to rejuvenate them, and they really get on this run. I think they've been really good. When they beat the Roosters and they showed their grit and defence, they've just gone on with it since then. So to get this one, under the circumstances, as we've said, Taumalolo and Cotter out and Lukey out before the game, as you mentioned, it's really big for them to get this win, and it's going to be really hard to sort of knock them out of the top 8 now with the form that they're displaying.
Yeah, so I think that'll be like a good chance of making the 8. If I had to put money on them, I'd probably say that, 100% their certainty, especially with a game like that, backing up with not your full squad and having to face that pressure. I think the only thing is I know they're susceptible to some like odd performances, and if they get maybe 1 or 2 of those in the run home, that'll make me think, are they going to be pushing for the 8? But I think they're pretty safe now.
They do have a tough run home, the Cowboys, so it's going to be a big test for them. Definitely not certainties to stay in that 8, and tough games to come, but it's going to be really good for them to see actually where they are at. If they can get a few wins against some tough competition here, could really let them know where they stand for this season. Mate, in terms of some of their standouts, I'm going to start with Griffin Neame off the bench, obviously forced to play some bigger minutes in this game with the notable injuries that we've already talked about. I'm such a fan of Griffin Neame, have been since he debuted essentially, and earlier this season they were starting him. Now he's back off the bench playing some incredible footy. What are your thoughts on Griffin Neame?
Yeah, he's a big body. He just seems to, when he gets the minutes or he gets the demand, he seems to just really put out impressive performances. I'd like to see him a bit more dominant in that team, and I think Taumalolo is kind of pushing towards, like, I wouldn't say the end of his career, but he's just, the injuries, he's definitely not the same bloke he used to be. He's playing in that prop rotation now, so they're obviously looking to limit his minutes, and I would just hope that Neame can maybe steal some more of those minutes or a bit more consistency in that team, because he's a massive body. I got to see him versing the Titans earlier in the year, and he was warming up along the sideline, and I was just like, my God, that guy's massive. I was like, look, he could be dominant for sure. Gigantic
human being he is, and he's a fantastic bloke too. I cannot say how much I love Griffin Neame. 37 minutes he played, and he punched out 177 metres.
Dude, that's mental.
Yeah. Absolute weapon. So, yeah, I thought he was outstanding for the Cowboys. You mentioned Valentine Holmes. Originally named to play on the wing in this one, but Murray Taulagi, a late inclusion, who I thought also was excellent in this game. What do you make of Valentine's performance?
Oh, I love it, and I think it's bound to happen. He's someone I'm super high on in fantasy. He's under the 600K bracket. He's a known player that can hit the 700K market. He has kind of been a bit inconsistent this year, but he's just coming back from Origin. He's now been in the news. He's on the open market to negotiate with clubs to see what his market value is before maybe re-signing an extension with the Cowboys, which is probably the most likely outcome there, unless bloody Roosters throw $1 million deal at him or something. But yeah, I think that with all of that behind him, like it's the onus is now on him to put his foot forward and show what he's worth and to put out some good form. And with all of those things behind him, I think we've just seen the start of that with Holmes, and he's going to have a massive impact on the run home.
100%. If he can play with this sort of consistency level, this level of performance for the run home, he's going to be a weapon. Someone that I sold in Supercoach at about round 17, I think, to free up cash for one of your boys in Ronaldo Mulatalo. I don't think I've got the trades to get Valentine back, unfortunately, but if the Cowboys are going to continue playing the way that they are, he's definitely going to be someone you want to own in Supercoach and fantasy. Mate,
completely agree.
Some other Cowboys that sort of really tickled my fancy. I mean, you have to mention Scott Drinkwater each and every week. What he does, I think there was a time that there would have been one of the bloke podcasts that would have been in the lead up to Origin. I think Denon mentioned if you wanted to out Reece Walsh, Scott Drinkwater's the man to do that. And I thought it was a very interesting, and I really like the take, to be honest. He's so erratic in the way he plays, but I think what he brings to that Cowboy side is exactly what they need.
100%. It's so funny that I was smiling when you were saying that Reece Walsh Drinkwater comparison, because that's literally how I explain him to people in fantasy. It's like in terms of his scoring, and I've never really put it together as them actually being similar players for their teams on the field, but I've always just looked at their scores and seen them as similar players. But when you put it like that, it's like, yeah, they're prone to errors, but their attacking upside is just so insanely top level that, it's kind of like what comes with their attacking prowess. So, I don't mind him at all. I like Scotty Drinkwater. I think that if you think of every single halfback in the comp, he's not the best, but he's definitely up there in top 5 when he's on. And I think, that Cowboys need to lock him in long term and keep powering along with him. I think couldn't speak highly enough of him. I really like Drinkwater.
We're in such a fantastic array of fullbacks at the moment. Like, you think every single side in the NRL at the moment has essentially a superstar fullback in there. Even your Connor Tracy's for the Bulldogs with what he's doing and how he played this week. They're not going to get dislodged for that position. And then you've got players like Liam Ison, who made his debut, who could obviously play there at a high click. Think of the Dolphins with Trey. Wait, what's his name? Trey Fuller? Trey Fuller. Walk into almost any other club, but because of the quality in that position at the moment, it's such a tough position for players to really break into. So, yeah, love what Scott Drinkwater's doing for the Cowboys. Another one that I mentioned last week on the Ruck Infringement podcast is Viliami Vailea. Now, obviously, highly touted coming through the Warriors, didn't really reach the form we needed in between, the depth that we had, injuries and whatnot. Got his shot at the Cowboys this year through a few injuries of their own. I think he's been really good for the Cowboys recently.
He's very consistent with his run meters, which kind of tells me that he likes to get involved. I think, what did he run? Like 120 meters, maybe 100 meters. I can't remember if I'm getting
117,
confused.
Mate.
117. Yeah, so, he's pretty consistent in that regard. I think he's just prone to defensive errors. So he makes a lot of tackles and things like that. But you kind of see that improve with young players in the centres. Like centre, I played centre when I played rugby league in Sydney. And I'm telling you, it's probably the hardest position on the field for defence, because you've got to make a decision. You've got to jam. It's lots of one-on-one. So, if you're in a smaller body or you're inexperienced, that can really, really come at a cost. And I think that you're just kind of seeing that with him. I think over the next couple of years, you'll probably see those missed tackles turn into like 1 every 3 games, because centers don't make that many tackles as it is. So it's just when they do make those decisions, they have to count, because the ball's only coming out to you because they're spreading it for an attacking play. So Look, I think he's definitely been touted as a pretty good player, and I was surprised to see the Warriors let him go. But you see the centre stocks they've got coming through, you can see why, and I think Cowboys have got onto something good there. So hopefully, yeah, he can just prove himself for the rest of this year and into next.
100%, mate. Now, we probably spent a little bit too much time on the Sharkies rather than the Cowboys, so I'll rattle off a few other names that I thought were really good. Harrison Edwards, I like the signing that they brought him over from the Bulldogs. I think he's been quite good as of recently. Sam McIntyre all season, filling in every which position, I thought has been really good. Got through his work again in this one. And now Taumalolo also obviously went down with that facial fracture, but this was his record-breaking performance for the Cowboys. This puts him into outright second position for their most capped player of all time. So sad for him to finish the day the way it did, but I wanted to congratulate him for that. I didn't realise how quickly he'd gotten there, and to surpass Matty Bowen, an absolute Cowboys legend, is a great achievement for Jason Taumalolo.
100%. And it kind of makes sense that his name's there. Like, he's been what would you call it? A household name. That's what I'd say in fantasy literally since I started. So he's just been powering through. He's just always been great. He got signed on a massive deal as a young kid, which I'm pretty sure is the deal he's still on now. And, he's just had some unfortunate stuff. I think it's like a knee degenerative issue or something at the moment. And now he's busted his face, but he's still there. He when he gets the ball, even after everything he's been through, he's still got X factor. He's still dominant. He's not someone you can kind of look sideways at. So yeah, he deserves it. I love Taumalolo.
100%, mate. Also, yeah, when I started Supercoach, he was the first picked in my team every single year. It feels weird not. I think I was going to say this year might have been the first year I didn't own him, but I actually did own him. I owned him for one game, started the season with him, and then after they played him for like 10 minutes, I'm like, nah, sold him to Terrell May. But yeah, it feels weird just not having Taumalolo in my squad all the time. But yeah, as you said, he's definitely not someone that you can just look sideways at. He's still able to punch out those massive numbers. Pretty sure he chalked up 200 just a couple of weeks ago. So he's still got it in him. Really unfortunate with the knee issue that he's facing. That's going to, slow down the back end of his career. But if he retired right now, he'd go down as one of the best ever. Like, I can't remember any forwards in my time besides hookers that have won a Dally M medal, and he's one of them to do it. I think maybe before that there's Gavin Miller and Bradley Clyde are some of the only ones off my head. So yeah, Taumalolo, an absolute legend, and congratulations for moving into outright second position for the Cowboys, mate. Let's get into the Roosters and Seagulls. Try and speed through these a little bit so I don't have to keep you here forever. But Roosters, they beat the Seagulls in this one, but not without making it difficult for themselves.
Yeah, look, Roosters looked like they were going to destroy them in early stages, and I was pissed. I literally walked away from the screen for 15, 20 minutes and had the game paused, but I was like, I can't watch this, man, because I had Daly Cherry Evans and I had Ruben Garrick and Ola Kawatu wasn't playing, but got all those three guys in my fantasy team. So I'm like, oh man, not Cherry Evans 2 weeks in a row. Come back, it's like, who cares? It is what it is. At least my Roosters players are going to go good and come back. And I'm like, what the hell are they doing? Granted, I think it was very lucky. The Manly Seagulls. I think most of their comeback was based on intercepts, which is like, what the hell? It was like 3 or 4 of them in one game. I've never seen that before. But look, I was happy to see Daly Cherry Evans snag one of them and run 60 metres with only Luke Keary chasing him to score a try. It was massive. And Garrett getting injured made him goal kicker. So me buying him 2 weeks ago has turned out to be a bit of a pod play.
No, I love that. Yeah, as you mentioned, a few lucky intercepts coming their way between Daly Cherry Evans taking that one. I can't recall who took it was the winger from was a Tigers player, Teddy Chase.
Talau.
Yeah, Tommy Talau took the other one, ran the length of the field. I think it's throwing a bit of a mask on Manly's performance in this one. Yes, the Roosters were poor to let them back in, but the scoreline, the Roosters were dominant for essentially all of this game. And the thing is, they did keep attacking where they probably didn't need to. If they wanted to wind down the clock and just play safe footy, it would have ended up being a 36 to sort of 6 scoreline. But they kept trying to attack. Things didn't come off, and the scoreline really got back in Manly's favour. They didn't win the game, but I think it's throwing a bit of a blanket over their performance in this one. They were outclassed essentially the entire game long. It was quite difficult losing Saab and Garrick early, and that's always a tough position to find yourself in, trying to cover those positions, already having Ben Trebojevic playing in the centres with their injuries as well. So it is tough. You can throw them in, but even before that, they were getting severely outclassed by the Roosters. But good to see them claw them way back into it. The Daly Cherry Evans pickup in fantasy is something that I was looking at in Supercoach last week, as 2 weeks ago now as well. I was planning on using my final boost in Supercoach and going Dylan Brown to him. Luckily, I waited a week and jumped on Nathan Cleary because I probably wasn't going to have the trades to do it either way. But Daly Cherry Evans is definitely someone that we've been talking a little bit about in the Supercoach world over on Chip and Chase as well. So I'm really finding it cool to see that you've jumped on him over into the fantasy realm.
Loved it. Look, he's just always been there, and at the start of the season he was a bit scary, seeing that Luke Brooks was taking so much time off him, so much game management off him, and that just shot his price down. But it wasn't really that. It was just that, like, Cherry Evans and the players he had around him, like Turbo was out of form. He had Benny Turbo kind of switching between edge and centre, and he never had that consistency. And then now it's like, oh, well, look, he's had Origin. He's bounced back. Like I've said, with like all of these Origin players, they bounce back into the run home, and there's just something about that experience that just elevates them back to normal. I just put trust in that, and I was like, stuff it. He's cheaper than I've seen him in a run home in fantasy for like the last 5 years. So I'd punch the money on him. I could have got Cleary last week easily. I've done a really good job with cash management over the Origin period, and I could one trade Cleary this week I don't know who I'll do it for yet. I haven't really looked into it, but Cleary and Cherry Evans in the halves looks pretty decent for us in the run home.
Yeah, love that, mate. Look, he came home with a wet sail last year as well, Daly Cherry Evans, so I assume it's going to be a similar mould this season. Seagulls also aren't locked into that top 8, so they need to win a few more games to make sure that they stay there, and Cherry Evans will be really good for that. So definitely someone to consider in the fantasy and Supercoach worlds. On to a few stand-up performances for Manly despite the loss. Clayton Fualalo is someone that we tipped in the pre-season. He has been an absolute gun in the lower grades leading into this season. Was really good in the trials as well, I thought. To see him fully get a bit of a run in this one, I think he played upwards of 40 minutes due to the injuries to Ruben Garrick and Jason Saab, both being head injuries, which allowed the 18th man in Fualalo to get activated. Thought it was really good to see him get that extended run and to score a try in just his second NRL game.
That's exactly what I was about to note when you were saying that. It was just sick to see him cross the line. He's definitely... I've never really had him on my radar, to be honest. I've never really seen that much of him. And to see him this game was my first time watching him. I was pretty impressed with how he performed.
Yeah, I think he's an absolute gun. He's got his try-scoring record in the lower grades is it's outrageous. It's unreal. You definitely go and have a look at it. Throw on some of his highlights. He's a gun. Play him at... I think he's an out-and-out setter in my opinion, but you could play him on the wing or at fullback and he wouldn't look lost. So really good to see him get a good performance in this one. Beyond that, for the Seagulls, you mentioned Cherry Evans. We don't need to talk on him too much, but I thought he was really good the way he controlled this game and tried to will his team back into it despite their very slow start. Tom Trebojevic, however, quite quiet.
Yeah, look, it's been him this year. A lot of people were like, oh, I'm buying Tom Trebojevic next week, and I'm trying to advise them, hey, like, look, he's not necessarily a bad buy, but he showed consistent. I owned him from literally round 1 up to about round 12-ish this year, till he got injured that next time, and traded him out and said, I'm not getting him back. He just never seemed to stride into like that old 2021 turbo form. He never really had any massive reach-out games, and then last week was his massive reach-out game, and then everyone's jumping on, and I'm like, you kind of want to see this for a while before you dive in, and this is exactly why.
No, exactly, mate. I'm glad we're in the same boat in avoiding him. So how's the fullback work in fantasy? Who are your fullbacks in NRL fantasy?
I'll bring mine up now. So you get 3 winger fullbacks. So you can pick a winger or a fullback across the 3 positions, and then you get 2 just out-and-out centres. So I'll bring my team up now. It's probably a bit different, the relevance in ours. At the moment, was running Ruben Garrick and Jacob Carraz in the centres, and then running Tedesco, Campbell, and who did I say? I already said Garrick, didn't I? Who did I move? Hang on, maybe I've made a trade here.
While Jai's looking at that, just the difference between Supercoach and Fantasy in that state, if you are looking to get into either of these games, if you're looking to get into Fantasy, definitely give Jai a follow because that is one of the best in the business for that. Supercoach is more my speed here, but I'm hoping that we can do a bit of content heading into next season. Very similar games that we can combine sort of our knowledge on these. But in Supercoach, you get centre wingers, so the wing and centre positions are combined. You get your 4 playing players and then 3 options on the bench, so a total of 7 centre or winger options. And then you get 2 fullbacks, a bench fullback and a playing fullback. Of course, you're allowed to set your reserves as well, so you can have both your fullbacks playing, which you normally want to be doing in Supercoach. So in Fantasy, it's a bit different, so I'll let Jai talk about that one.
Yeah. Is just a lot more defensive and base stat orientated. So you see your fullbacks and things like that. They're more players that you get with consistency in their side. So someone that has a lot of run meters. So people like your Tedesco's. We get dual position. I'm not sure if you guys get a thing called DPP. Yeah, so dual position. So we kind of look for players that are either just guns in fullback that are underpriced, typically for fantasy, or you want someone that's dual position that kind of has a buff in stats historically in that position. So, for example, I've got Jaden Campbell at the moment playing in the halves that has wing fullback half dual position. And because he's playing half, his base stats and kick meters increase his performance in fantasy. So he's just solid to have in your fullback spot. You've got a guaranteed 40 plus every week. Karaz is the same. He's typically playing centres, but he plays on the wing and stuff too. Again, winger, fullback, centre versatility, can move them around the team way better. And he's a bit similar to like that Walshy, Drinkwater, Pappenhausen. It's like if he's scoring a floor, it's a 35. Around 35 to 40, but he can hit 70, so he hit 72 this week, which is massive. So very similar sort of thing. I'd say the only difference between Supercoach and Fantasy in that regard is Supercoach tends to benefit attacking stats a lot heavier than they do in Fantasy. So it's fullbacks. We got a rule over at Blindside: never put the C on someone wearing a jersey from 1 to 5. And it's just because if they rely too heavily on attacking stats to score well, and because Fantasy doesn't reward those attacking stats as heavy as they do in Supercoach, you need a fullback to score a try-double or massive impact in the game with try assists and line breaks to hit that 70 score you want for a captain. Whereas if you got halves with base stats or like a mid, like a Payne Haas or a Yo, it's way more dominant and reliable.
Yeah, and that's, I think, is probably one of the main differences in Supercoach and Fantasy, because over in Supercoach, captains on fullbacks is like your bread and butter. It's really what you're going to do. Halfbacks are your second, probably most main position. But the thing with halfback and Supercoach is recently there haven't been an abundance of great options. So you're sitting there with Nathan Cleary and Nico Hines in essentially every year for the last 3 years, obviously in and out with injury. But normally you just sit on them. Everybody does the same things. Fullbacks have been really interesting this year in Supercoach with the abundance of fantastic players. There's no right or wrong answers between James Tedesco, Tom Trebojevic, Reece Walsh, Scott Drinkwater, Chance Nickel-Cook started stages, Ryan Pappenhausen. There's been a lot of great options, but in Supercoach you are rewarded quite heavily for attacking stats. That's why last week, the week before I should say, Tom Trebojevic's performance was almost season-ending with the score that he put out, being a top 20-odd score of all time. And if he didn't own or captain, it was quite tough. But those are the sort of big differences, I guess, in the fullback role. If you are looking to get into these games, definitely, weigh them both up. We can, between us and myself here at Chip and Chase and Jai at Fantasy, we can give you the pros and cons and you can make the decision. You're also welcome to play both games, which there's nothing illegal. There's obviously a rivalry between Supercoach and Fantasy players, but there's nothing wrong with playing both. I've meddled in both before, so give that a bit of a look in.
I was going to say, you could probably look to do some sort of collaboration at points next year where it's you could have like a Supercoach take and I could have a fantasy take, and we could do like buy, hold, sell or something like that if that's relevant over in your space as like an occasional collab. So kind of introducing fantasy to each page or something like that, get people across the board. Because to be honest, I literally signed in to play Supercoach this year and selected a side because my mate told me to, and then just got too deep in fantasy and wanted to commit. But if I had someone I was kind of doing, I would love to learn more about it. So keen to get into both.
I love that call. There's obviously a bit of content to be made there between us. Yeah, you getting me into fantasy, I getting you into Supercoach, and let's see how far we can go. So hopefully, stay tuned if you listen to this one. We might have a bit of content prepared for next season between Jai and I delving into that. Let's get back to the Roosters Seagulls, mate. Were there any other Seagulls performers that really stood out to you? There weren't too many for me in this one.
Nah, not for me really either. I think we've gone over the main ones.
Yeah, that's it. Look, it's an interesting game for the Seagulls. It was a good test for them to see how they matched up against some of the premier sides of our competition. They didn't, as we said, the scoreline flatters them a bit. They didn't really match up all that well, but they've got a good little draw to come. We'll have to see. They come into the bye this week, so have to see how they come out of that bye before they run into finals. As for the Roosters, mate, I thought they were really good. They just came out firing straight away after their loss to the Storm last week. We tipped them to bounce back in a big way. They did just that, mate.
Yeah, dude, Teddy was insane. I think first 22 minutes, he already had like 2 try assists and a try or something crazy like that. He just doesn't look like slowing down. You know, he got dropped from Origin this year, but then he got selected and he scored a try. And I thought, look, he's done enough as the previous captain to stay. And they still put Edwards in, which turned out to be a winning play, I guess. But look, he is insane. I can't speak highly enough of him. And I think the only negative I could probably say about that game was that Angus Crichton went a little bit missing, but I wouldn't say he played bad. He just kind of wasn't really that involved in the attacking side of play.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that the Seagulls did quite well, is they really did a number and got up in Angus's face quite often, didn't really give him that chance to shine. He likes a bit of a crab across field as well, sticking out that fence, similar in a David Fafita sort of way, or even Andrew Fafita back in the day, loved to just run across field fending, and they really just swatted that fend down and took him down really well, stopped that offload. So I guess that's one thing Manly did well, and I think it's a blueprint that maybe some other clubs can take when looking at the Roosters, but it's easier said than done because Angus Crichton is one of the best in the game, and to wrap him up and really quieten him, it's a tough ask. But yeah, the Roosters, you mentioned Tedesco, he was electric. He made our team of the week on the bench. Didn't quite get that fullback spot, but God, he couldn't have done much more to really get that. It was just an unreal performance from Connor Tracy that stopped him from getting that. We mentioned Joseph Suaalii, who I thought was fantastic. Another one I wanted to talk about, Brandon Smith. Now, a lot of people have been very much on the train that he's been a bit of a dud signing, hasn't lived up to expectations, and fair enough, maybe you can argue he hasn't lived up to expectations, but I thought he was really good in this game, and even last week against the Storm. And there's different facets of his game that he has, like the aggression and big hits that he can use to inspire his team, as he did last week against the Storm. But this week, his kicking game from dummy half, I thought was unreal.
Yeah, I loved that he stepped up in that regard, because that's where Brendan Smith can be really, really pivotal. Is he did it a lot at the Melbourne Storm. It's very similar to how Reid Marnie injects himself. It's those notices that the markers are out, or that the defensive line isn't back. Sorry, not the defensive line, that the back three aren't back early in a set, and there's an opportunity there, and he just puts his head up and takes the opportunity. I think we've seen that a lot last week and this week, and I hope he keeps playing that way. In terms of fantasy, he doesn't score too great, and at his price point, you wouldn't go there, and he has a bit of a defensive lapse. Like he's definitely prone to miss tackles, but I think if he's one of those players, if you ever just get the opportunity and it comes into your head next game, just watch him when he's nowhere near the ball and he literally is staring at the ground, sprinting as hard as he can, and he's completely not even near the play. His effort areas are insane. He's the guy that you turn to the last 10 minutes of a game and everyone's stuffed and you need to win, who's going to run out of the line, risk a HIA just to put a massive shot on. And it's just who he is. So yeah, he's got a great character. I think that he has had a bit of negativity around him, but hopefully the Roosters just stick with him.
Mate, I love what you said there. I think a lot of casual watchers of the game might not realise the stuff that he does. There's a reason he's not an 80-minute hooker, and it's not necessarily because he's unfit or he should be a front row or whatnot. He gets through so much work that a lot of people aren't really privy to if you're not watching him. As you just said, just keep an eye on him in a game. There's a few players out there that you just watch. You decide, okay, for the next few sets, I'm just watching what he does in every set. Brandon Smith's one of those. Just do it for a game, do it next week or whatnot. Now that we've mentioned it, he probably won't do it next week, but keep an eye on him. He is, constantly working hard and getting back there. So I really thought Brandon Smith was good in this one. Another man I wanted to mention, Lindsay Collins. Now, Lindsay Collins is a weird sort of player where you look at his numbers and they're never astronomical. In fact, you could argue they're quite poor in a few aspects. But what he brings to a game, I think he comes up with more big moments in big games than a lot of superstars in the NRL, and he's a front rower. So yeah, what he was doing in this game, the way he was cleaning up kicks in attacking play, the try savers he makes, there was the big hit he made, which I thought was going to swing momentum when Manly were clawing back into it, which I think he made Clayton Fualalo or someone drop the ball, and then the very next set was Kiri throwing that intercept. So that one wasn't rewarded, but he makes some incredibly big plays, Lindsay Collins.
I think that's why his name's just nearly locked into the Queensland side every year. He just has that about him, He's someone you can turn to, rely on. He's going to give 100% every single time. And it's not that he, like you said, blows everything out of the water. It's just that he's consistent, reliable, and he does the same stuff every single week. I like Lindsay Collins myself, except when he's playing with Queensland.
That's exact same here, mate. It's a absolute travesty watching him play for Queensland and not the Blues, but you got to admit he feels like a Queensland Origin player, Lindsay Collins.
He looks like one too, poor bugger.
Yeah, look, he's not winning any modelling contests, poor Lindsay. Look, not too many other players I can think of for the Roosters that really stood out. I thought they all had really good games. Michael Jennings, I want to give a shout out to him. His defence, I thought, was quite good in this one as well, and he scored a nice little try to boot. But beyond that, I thought this was just a really good team performance from the Roosters, and something that they really needed to bounce back from that game against the Storm and really solidify themselves heading into the back end of this season.
Completely agree. It was just a fun game to watch.
Really enjoyable game to watch. Lots of fun attacking play, and that's what footy's all about after all. Let's move into the next game, the Dragons versus the Penrith Panthers. And look, there's only one thing that's on everyone's minds here, and that is Nathan Cleary. Jai, I'll pass it to you. Your mate in fantasy. What do you think?
Oh, mate, look, you have to expect it, to be blatantly honest. I run the risk of saying, look, fantasy space, he's a watch, there's a lot of factors. I won't run over the whole lot of it here, but obviously his background is he's the best player in fantasy, and he has been for years. His recent scoring for the last few years has kind of been subject to a bit of fluctuation because of representative duties and sort of injuries or little bits and pieces. And the big problem was, it's okay, well, he's only played 6 games this year before stepping into round 21, and there's been 17 games he could have been available to play, and that's assuming that he was selected for Origin. Wasn't selected for Origin, and he's only averaging, I think it was 14 points less than usual, which is only a 6-game sample, so it's not very reliable. But he's also been pretty heavily injured on the right side of his body, so he's sustained, I think 2023 was a right hamstring tear, and that was 6 weeks, and then in the grand final he ruptured his PCL, which he actually doesn't play with a PCL in his right knee anymore, and he's got the hamstring strain at the start of the year, which was 5 weeks out, hamstring tightness upon his return, which left him out for another week, and then as soon as he come back the week after, he's been gone for 10 weeks. And in that 10 weeks they delayed his recovery because there was a little bit of issues with the recovery. He had to change his whole training regime so that they could take the strenuous, he's completely changed his training approach moving forward because they thought that was building too much pressure. Then there was also the narrative in the media that Ivan Cleary put out that they were going to be working him back into his usual role. We didn't see that the week prior because none of the Origin players backed up. So I was concerned that was this just a performance without any of the Origin stars where he's kind of forced to back up. And that was kind of why I was like, you know what, there's just too many factors here for me to jump in and take a risk when his break even's at 78, which in fantasy terms, Cleary's the person that's going to break that. But he'd only scored 73 the week before in his return. And with all these factors, I was like, you know what? He's not in a void. He's just a 1 week watch. And I'll tell you what, my God, it bit me in the ass, and I got so much hate on social media for it. I'm like, guys, come on. It's just a theory, put it out there. A lot of hate, but look, at the same time, there are only people who are going to notice the hate more than they notice the wins. And look, he's a bye this week if it makes everyone feel better, 100%.
No, that's just it, mate. And look, if you're taking advice from myself or Jai on this sort of stuff, it is just advice. Like, we don't control your lives or what you do. We can only put forward what we sort of think. Everything that Jai mentioned about Nathan Cleary was very valid. It's a sort of similar reason that I avoided him earlier this season when he came back originally from that hamstring injury. A lot of people jumped on him in Supercoach then. I'd assume the same in fantasy. And it's something that I was just like, look, there was no research and all the good stuff that Jai did in my thing. I was just like, look, I'm going to have a gut feel that I'm going to watch him 2 weeks back. And sure enough, the second week back was when he did that injury again. A lot of people got on him before he even played the first game back. Then a lot of people watched him get through a game and went, okay, now's the time to jump on. Then he went and did that. So, there's a lot of validity in what Jai says. If you're going to give a bit of backlash for that, like, you come off it. We're all for a bit of banter. We can take a bit of shit here and there, and Jai's taken his fair few licks for doing it, and none more so than not owning Cleary. But yeah, come on, let's leave the actual hate and nasty things out of it, eh?
Yeah. Look, is what it is. It comes with the territory, I guess. I know that in the Patreon chat, it's not something that they would see on social media, the free socials, but in our Patreon chat, the advice I gave you for Cleary was specific to your situation. So we took into account there, which we don't offer in our free socials, is trade advice, just because there's just too much demand there. When we don't have enough ability to take it on. But with the Patreon, it's just like, hey, look, I want Cleary. Your advice is to wait. What do I do? You take into account their trade position, the players that they've got, how much money they've got in the bank, what they're going to need to do to make that trade. And yeah, you could, some people, it's like, yeah, you could possibly wait. But look, if you wait, you're risking not getting him at all. You might as well just take the plunge and grab him now. So the general article was just to give a light on the fact of the risk factors that are leading to our decision to wait, because we were in the position to do so. But a lot of our players in our Patreon chat getting our trade advice, we encourage them to bring him in just because it fit their narrative. So look, everyone's different, and that's, at the end of the day, I always like to think of it like this. I could provide insight, analysis, everything, advice, but I don't have your username and I don't have your password. You're the coach. You have to make the last decision. That's
just it, mate. And you make a lot of good advice out there that, sort of falls through when these bad ones come out. Not that it was bad advice, I should say, but when you get something wrong, you hear about it a lot. But how did you make of of Cleary's actual performance in the game against the Dragons, mate?
Insane. Like, who the hell gets 3 tries as a half in their second game back from 10 weeks out? And he kicks his goals and he's setting up tries everywhere. He's just insane. And you watch him off the ball. It's probably, I've never really noticed it before this game. But, the ref blows a penalty. And he's got the ball in his hand. And before the ref's over to talking to someone. And he practices the kick for the line. He just literally grabs the ball and boots it and the line. It doesn't count for anything. It's just like he's just focused on the future, what he's going to do, what I've got planned. A ref called an offside penalty from that was in favour of the Panthers. And he tried for a drop goal. And it's just like, yeah, the drop goal meant nothing, but it's just like his head is just so focused on the game that it's like, I will go as far to say that if he plays the rest of his career in the form that he's played his career so far, he will go down as the greatest halfback of all time, maybe even the best player to ever play the game. That's how high I think of Cleary. I think he's amazing, and he just goes to show every week why people have that opinion of him.
Mate, I can't say anything better than what you just said there. I'm in the exact same boat. Something I didn't notice what you said about the whole kicking for the line where there's a bit of a plain break and play, but these are really good things, just to put more perspective on that. It's not just doing it in warm-ups or doing it in training. It's when you've played 70-odd minutes of a game under fatigue, lactic acid setting in, can you pull that off? Crowd still rearing. Yeah, okay, it's still a break and play, but it's just a bit of practice in that sort of stuff, and it's really good to see him actually doing those things. And I think these are factors that tie into making the greatest ever. And as you said, I think he has the career trajectory to go down as one of, if not the greatest halfback or player of all time. He's He's unreal. And yeah, this game, there's not much more that we can say that we haven't or other people with better minds than us haven't already said. So let's move into a few other Panthers players. Dane Laurie, mate, he went off with a concussion after he made that break on the sideline. I feel so sorry for Dane Laurie. He's had a few times this year where he's earned that spot and he's come back, whether it's on the wing or at fullback, and he's played fantastically, and then bang, head knock, he's out for the game and you'll miss the next week. So I thought he was really good leading into that.
Yeah, he has been really good, and that's a reason why they keep picking him there. And I think that it's the perfect, like, Panthers just seem to keep doing it. Like, how the hell is Dylan Edwards out for 6 weeks, but you got someone like Dane Laurie to fill the boots? It's like, you're obviously culture. It is a shame. I don't think he has much to worry about. I think he's shown enough now at different points of the season to pretty much lock himself into that backup utility role. I think that there is probably a possibility once Edwards comes back that he takes McLean off from the edge and then he'll move back to the wing. But yeah, I guess we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, there's a few options there, obviously, with Paul Alamotti out, the Taylor May situation and whatnot. Casey McLean is the one playing. I'm not sure what's going on with Jesse, the elder brother. I'd assume he's injured at the moment because I thought he would get picked over Casey, but Casey has shown some great form in his view. This was his third appearance of the season. He's 18 or 19 years old. Scores his first NRL try. He's looked fantastic. Last week, I thought defensively he was unreal. This week in attack and everything, I thought he's shown so many great parts of his game. For someone of such a young age, I think in the next couple of seasons, those McLean boys, they're just going to be, they could be the best sort of centers and wings that this Penrith crop has had coming through.
Yeah, for sure. He's brilliant. Yeah, Jesse, his brother, I think he's done something to his collarbone. I can't remember exactly, but he's out for like, I think, a little bit more of an extended than just a couple of weeks. So not sure how long he'll be back. But as what you said, it's just like, it's kind of like the next crop of Tago and May. For me, they're kind of just that real young age, even though Tago and May's not there anymore, but Tago's still very, very young. It's like they're already producing that next crop, and it's not necessarily that they're going to push anyone out. It's, again, what that narrative you said before, it's competition for position, giving juniors the opportunity to develop their skill set and gain experience. And Panthers it doesn't really seem to matter at the moment who they lose. It's who they've got coming up and who they buy. They just keep getting better and better and better.
No, exactly. To think, before that it was a Matt Burton and Stephen Crichton, you'd think these players are irreplaceable, and they just keep coming up with fantastic juniors. And the McLean brothers, to see what Casey's doing at his age, I think he's going to be an unreal player. Beyond that, for the Panthers, Liam Martin, I thought this was his best game of the season, in my opinion. I thought he was unreal. We know how aggressive he is in the lines he runs, but God, they just could not handle him, the Dragons.
Yeah, he's a big boy, isn't he, when he gets going? I'm pretty sure he scored a try as well. I've definitely scored a try because I had him in a multi. So yeah, but I'll bring up the stats now on him. What was that? 145 meters he's ran here for fantasy. That's crazy for an edge of someone that is kind of like a Liam Martin. He's not necessarily known as a big meter eater. He's more of just that big impact player close to the line. But yeah, I agree with you. Best game of the season for him so far.
100%. His second row partner as well, Scott Sorensen, I thought was fantastic. Good to see him picking up a nice little try as well. So both second rowers playing really well and getting rewarded with tries. Isaiah Yeo got through his usual work. I've got the stats here. He ran the ball. By the way, Nathan Cleary ran for the most meters in the game as a halfback. He ran for over 100 meters more than the top Dragons running player.
Dude, that's insane. He had a massive drop in kick meters, which was what we presume was going to happen. But it seems like he's just turned that into a tagging play. Like he's just turned into Luai that still kicks a bit. So it's like, yeah, wow, that is crazy actually for a half. Someone who's meant to feed the ball has ran more meters than anybody in the game.
Mental stuff. Max Fairnay, the top Dragons run meters with 140. Nathan Cleary, 242 as a halfback. Unbelievable stuff. But beyond that, Isaiah Yeo was the man we were just mentioning. He ran the ball 20 times himself for 186 metres. Love his role in attack here. His role in this Panthers system is one of the best. He's not a role player by any stretch of the imagination, Isaiah Yeo, because he's such a good player. But he is a role player in a way to this system, and what he does is like he's the best of any role player in quotation marks out there. 186 metres and 44 tackles as well, 80 minutes.
Yeah. He's brilliant. I love the way that the Panthers use him, and I want to see more teams try and implement the strategy. But it's obviously your typical back rower feeds the ball to the edges, to the halves. But the way that they do it is with a sweeping half. So you'll notice that Luai and Cleary stand somewhat pretty close to him at a deeper line, and then they let him run across field or run a little bit of an angle into the line so that the players commit, and then they throw it to the halves sweeping, which allows them to then sweep and straighten their line, which draws more players in. And it's hard to explain, but it's kind of like it's hard to explain without, like, say, an image. But yeah, the sweeping just means that the outside players have got enticed to jump in and to try and cut off that line, and they always score out on the fringes. And and if they don't, that's where you hit the edges. And then Scorenson and Martin have both just gone straight through the guts. So brilliant. I love Yo. Can't speak highly enough of him.
That's just it, mate. And another thing to note for the Panthers in this game, obviously winning this one 46-10. This was in Wollongong, which has been a bit of a fortress for the Dragons. And the Panthers lost James Fisher-Harris, their enforcer, really early on in this match with a groin injury that looks to sideline him for a few weeks. So to win this one the way that they did is really, it's so impressive. Lindsay Smith, who we mentioned for our team of the week off the bench, 18 runs, 156 metres, stepping up into that role. Beyond that, Liam Henry, who's been really good this season. And then Maverick Gaia got through 60 minutes in this one, the young fella. Been a bit of a guy that we've looked at in Supercoach. I'm not sure on the fantasy aspect, but someone who's been thereabouts. We've always been waiting for him to get that shot. It's sort of come at a weird point that we can't really capitalise on the cash generation that we always wanted from him. But 13 runs and 119 metres from Maverick Gaia as well, and did not miss a tackle. So that's really exciting stuff for such a young prospect as well.
I agree. I think he's on the radar for me, to be honest, for fantasy on the run home, simply to maximise cash out value so that I can spread the rest of my trades as one trades to cut price keepers. Like, we've got Carrigan dropping in price, we've got Watson dropping in price over in fantasy, and I would love both of them in my side. So that's probably the only reason I'd be looking at him now. But yeah, he's brilliant. I'd hope to see him get more game time.
For sure. Moving over to the Dragons, look, wasn't to be for them. It's a hard one to really analyse. They were under the pump really early, and a lot of it from ref giving penalties, and they had to defend their line a lot for a long period of time. And I thought they did a good job for a fair while there, and they just cracked under the extended pressure. And from then on, the Panthers just sort of tore them apart. I don't think it's as bad of a performance as I've seen of the Dragons in seasons come past. But yeah, it's a really hard one to analyse. What do you make of the Dragons' performance in this one, Joe?
Well, I just think they just got way outdone by a way better team. It's simple as that. I think it's the Panthers' first game with all of their Origin players back, and they were just dominant. I'd say a special shout out to Jacob Little. He's been very consistent in that 80-minute role for them. Just keeps punching out reliable. Like, he's making huge tackles. I can see 59 tackles in a game, missed 7. So if you think about what that tackle count could have been in an absolute thrashing, he only missed 7 tackles at hooker. Oh God, I'm looking at the missed tackle numbers now, and they're massive.
It's not good viewing.
No, it's huge. So yeah, poor bugger. But I'd say, yeah, shout out to Little. He's been awesome.
That's just it. We'll talk a little bit about those missed tackles for the Dragons in this one. Again, a lot of it is just sustained pressure. Just eventually they're going to come under fatigue. But 4 missed tackles from Lomax, 3 from Sully, 3 from Flanagan, only the 1 from Hunt and Molo, 7 missed tackles from Little, but he did make 59, which is a pretty incredible knock. 2 from Faitala Mariner, 6 from Sewer, 3 Eisenhoof, 5 Saleh, 4 Leilua, and 3 from Murdoch Masilla off the bench as well. So lots of missed tackles there. I think it's just what happens when you're under fatigue. You start falling off tackles. I want to give a little bit of a shout out to NRL Fantasy Fanatics as well for their little chat on Jacob Little. The big fans of the old Little train. I know you've done some work with them.
Yeah. No, it was great for them to get on. He tried to convince me one time in an Instagram DM, and I'm like, oh, dude, I could see why you're interested, but they got Manu Brown on the bench. and he's not playing 80-minute games. It's just not enough for me. And then he goes, I'm taking the punt. And then that week he got like 70 odd, and I was like, oh, I should have listened. And then I wasn't in the market for a hooker anymore, and I'm like, dude, I kept saying, I hope he falls off, because I'm going to hate not owning him. And then now he's just, he's in keeper range, and I think Fanatics got him at around 590k. So
you got to love
done
that
a good
stuff
job.
though when someone calls something like that. Look, there's heaps of different minds that go to work into a lot of people that do content in these spaces, and we'll all have different opinions, so it's really good when you get a few right that a lot of others aren't jumping on, so shout out them for that. Look, mate, any other sort of Dragons performers that actually stood out to you? I thought Christian Tuipulotu was good, obviously one of their only try scorers in this one, but I thought when they signed him to the club at the beginning of this season, he was really going to challenge for that wing spot. Obviously not to be when they moved Zach Lomax there instead, but to see him getting that regular go in there now, I thought he's been quite good, Christian Tuipulotu.
Yeah, he's been dominant, especially the last 3 weeks. He's been putting up some strong performances. I think Jaden Sewer probably needs a shout too. I think that in a game where they got basically dominated, he seemed to just try and get involved in everything. The stats don't really back it up, but just the way he was on the field, he was pretty imposing. So, I think Dragons could hopefully learn a lot from that.
No, I agree with that, mate. I'm a big Jaden Sewell guy, someone that we outlined for a potential super coach buy at the start of the season, and he's gone really well in and amongst his injury-affected games. But the other thing for the Dragons in this one, only 2 forwards to run over 100 metres, and that was 105 from Harm Saleh and 117 from Toby Couchman off the bench, who I thought was really, really good in his time. Beyond that, though, their front rowers, their starting front rowers, we had 7 runs for 61 metres from DeBellin and 4 runs for 36 metres from Francis Molo. So, obviously, they didn't have too much possession in this game, so those numbers are going to be down. But, yeah, it's going to be very hard to win when your forwards aren't laying a platform.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Hopefully they can just scrub that and move on to next week.
That's just it, mate. They're still in and about the top 8, the Dragons, so we'll have to see how they bounce back from this one. Mate, let's move into the Dolphins and the Titans, the penultimate game for round 21. We've been here for a long time. Let's try and wrap these ones up a little bit quicker. What did you take away from this Dolphins-Titans game, mate?
I think it looked like Dolphins were going to smash it, and then all of a sudden they've just done what they've done every single week so far for like the last few weeks, is completely fall off a cliff in the second half, and Titans just kept on going. They're in form, so yeah, very impressive. Like Mo Fotuaika put out a massive performance. We said that earlier, but yeah, Titans definitely don't look like they're getting the spoon again this year.
No, for sure. I thought the Titans were almost shoo-ins with how they started, but they've found a little bit of form in amongst the season there, and they've been building, and I'm excited for where they go in the future, especially when they get AJ Brimson and Faisal Malaawi back. But as you said, the worrying signs about this game was another game that the Dolphins came out to a commanding lead, and they let that slip. They're up by 16 odd points or something last week against the Panthers, and they were run down. This time up 14-0, and they then let in 21 unanswered points to lose the game, and that is it's worrying stuff for a side that has been firmly entrenched inside that top 8 all season, and if they keep letting these ones slip, these are games that they need to win to remain in that top 8. It's going to be very hard ask for them to stay in there.
Yeah, completely agree. And they did this last season, I'm pretty sure, too. Very eerily similar. Strong start to the season. Looked like they were going to make finals, and then just dropped off a cliff and couldn't make it in. So hopefully they can turn it around this year. But look, I would not be upset to see Broncos, Titans, Dolphins, and who's the other one, Cowboys, all left out of the 8 this year. I would be stoked.
He's a Queensland hater. Mate, I don't hate the Queensland teams when it comes to NRL. I just hate the Queensland Origin team. But no, I'm worried for the Dolphins, their sort of finals aspirations, whether or not they make it again. I think it's a fantastic season. We keep forgetting that this is a team in their second year as a franchise, and they have been a lock in that top 8 since the start of the season. If they were to drop out, it's a long season. They're still a young side. I'm going to hold nothing against them, but these are the games that they needed to be winning to have any chance of staying in. In terms of standouts for them, I think Jack Bostock as the season progressed, I think he's been really, really good. He's gotten a lot better. Had about 2 or 3 tries taken off him in this one as well. So they didn't go without their chances. The Dolphins, they had their opportunities. They just couldn't execute them. I think he's been really good. What have you made of Jack Bostock this season?
He's been very impressive. I talked myself out of even going near him this year, fantasy-wise, which is like, nah, he didn't show me enough last year, but he's definitely stepped up. He's up there with one of the best wingers for his size. Like, he's just a tall dude, has range, he's strong now. He never used to have that strength, and then this year he's just burst on in strength. So, yeah, super impressive. I love him.
Yeah, I think he's been fantastic. You know, I think to start the season, he had a few games that we were maybe a little bit more critical on him than most, but it's just because we know what a talent he can be. Luckily, I was an owner of him in Supercoach this season, and a lot of people sold a bit earlier or didn't get on to start. I was lucky enough to hold on to when he hit that hat-trick of tries and got a big score, and sold him 2 weeks after that for good profit. But I think as the season's progressed, you could have held on to him in Supercoach and Fantasy, and he could have just been a player to have the entire time. He's been really good. Another player we've talked about every week, Isaiah Katoa, for what he's doing at his age, he's a talent.
Yeah, 100%. He's just coming through like that teething process of a young half. You know, not everyone can be Nathan Cleary. But Katoa at his age, he's just getting literally better and better and better every year. And I'm so stoked that Bennett decided to give him the reins this year and finally give him a chance to guide the team himself, because he really needed that transition to take the next step in his career. So whoever takes over in the coaching role next year for the Dolphins, can't remember if they have anyone off the top of my head yet. But
Christian Wolf will take over from assistant coach.
Wolf, awesome. So, yeah, hopefully they just keep that going with him and keep that trust in him, because I feel like he's the future of the Dolphins.
Oh, 100%. I'd love to see him carve out a career there and just become the face of that franchise for his entire career, because he's such a talent. I never saw him being this good, especially this early on in his career. Absolute weapon. Beyond that, for the Dolphins, obviously a tough game for them, but it was good to see both their starting front rowers cross for the opening 2 tries. Jesse Bromwich, he doesn't get many, and he got a nice one, as well as Tavita Pangai Jr., but he's scored a couple already this season for the Dolphins. Tavita.
Yeah, Tavita. Yeah, I think he's more than definitely not going to be there next year, but I'm actually stoked to see him back. I think he's an entertaining player. And I love having those guys. They're good to watch. And same with Bromwich. Look, he's obviously gone after this year. He's no more footy for him, but he was on no tries this year. So for him to just get that one try, you could see how much it meant to him too. His big swan dive in and heavy on the ball on the ground. It's like, that's sick to see. So yeah, pumped to see them both score.
100%. Gets him off the nudie, big Jesse Bromwich. He's been such a fantastic pickup from him. Another player that recently, stats don't really speak of the sort of stuff that Jesse Bromwich brings to a footy side. He is an absolutely outstanding player. We actually had him in the team of the week this season. Earlier this season, he might have only ran for about 70 metres, but his lead up play in attacking and his defence and his scramble work, it's the little things that you don't see with Jesse Bromwich. He's such a good player. Look, anyone else for the Dolphins really stand out for you, Joe?
Not really. Probably just a bit of an add-on there with Jesse Bromwich is that I think the whole team was pumped to see him score, because I don't think anyone would want to watch him at his age do a nudie run at Mad Monday. So, yeah, good. Well, I'm pretty sure they planned that probably. They would have handed him a ball in free space. But no.
No, it's good. That's a good bit of gear, mate. Look, yeah, it's a tough old game for the Dolphins, but we've spoken enough about that. All they can do from here is just keep on winning. I think we've got them in 2 weeks' time. Not sure who they've got next week. We'll do a quick round of tips after we wrap up this last game. Raiders and Rabbitohs, mate. Look, let's start things off. Jamal Fogarty, what a difference does he make to this Raiders side?
It's just it's guidance. What it is it's like Adam Reynolds 5 years ago with the Rabbitohs. It's just guidance. He just kicks the ball, tells people where to go, directs the traffic, and everyone just seems a bit more relaxed without the added pressure. So yeah, I really love him. I actually considered anti-potting him this year. If anything was to happen to Cleary, I was throwing Fogg straight in. But I think a lot of people were going to do that as well. It's kind of why I put Burton in the picture to see what would happen. But yeah, he's great for the Raiders.
Isn't he just? I've just realised we actually skipped over the Titans, so I'm going to backtrack already. Let's talk a little bit about the Titans. Look, really good comeback win for them to not so much keep finals hope alive. They're sort of well and truly dead and buried, but just good to see them scraping together these wins. Bo Fermor, I think, has been really good coming back from his ACL, easing into the season. Recently, I think he's been so consistent, Bo Fermor.
Yeah, I traded him in last week for fantasy because of how much I've been liking him, so completely agree with that stance.
I love that. I've owned him since the start of the season. Someone I wasn't really keen on, but I ended up owning, and then I've been looking to get rid of him all season, and then I've realised, hang on, he's actually a bit of a gun. Why am I trying to sell him? And now I'm just happy to own him. Now I love what Bo Fermor's doing. Jaden Campbell in that 5/8 role. Is he locked in there, you reckon? Another 3 try assist performance in this one? Is that his role moving forward?
100%. I don't see how you can move him. I think that there was a bit of a narrative in our Blindside posts a few weeks ago that you had to really be careful about jumping on him, Keeney, or Brimson, because we don't know what the rotation looks like with all of them in the side. And our theory was that the only way to get them all on the field for 80 minutes was Brimson centre, Keeney fullback, Campbell at 6. But then Brimson come out and said that he's not playing centre. He's playing half or fullback. Then that was a bit of a worry. But he come back for one game before that groin flared up again, and he was playing in at fullback, and Keeney was utility. So I think that's probably what we're going to see when he comes back.
Yeah, it's really interesting what they do in that position. I mean, I think Keeney, you know, of all the players that they need to keep, I think Keeney's the last on the list of those 3. I love what the other 2 bring. But at the same time, I think Keeney is the perfect fullback for what the Titans need at the moment. He gets through a lot of work. He's not just a flamboyant player. He's got that in his game, but he does so much good stuff. I think he topped the meter count again in this one with 260-odd metres. I think that sort of play is what Des Hasler is looking for at the moment. He's going to be incredibly hard to move from there, but I don't know what that means for AJ Brimson and Jaden Campbell. Brimson's locked up for a long, long time as well.
Yeah, I think that's their only play. Look, I think all I can see a couple of years down the track is that there's a possibility when Foran moves on that they might look for like a Brimson, Campbell in the halves, which I don't know. I'm telling myself that could be a possibility, but none of them are out and out 7s. So, you know, it's like they can really only play 6. So I don't know what's going to happen there. I think one of them is going to have to depart the club. And if they've locked down Brimson long term, it's either Campbell or it's Keeney. And I think they'd be more inclined to keep Campbell, but it'll probably depend a lot on his injury durability, because he is in and out quite a bit. And if they do keep Keeney, God, I hope the Sharks pick up Campbell. That would be epic. I love it.
Yeah, it's a very interesting sort of one, especially like you would, based on form and what's happening at the moment, you'd think Keeney would be the lock, especially with the injury woes with Campbell. But Campbell has very strong family ties there, with, of course, his old man being a Titans legend. So it's going to be very hard. I do think that they have to move one on, and it's going to be a really difficult decision to make. But, you know, we'll worry about that when it happens. No matter who's moved on, they'll be snatched up by another club in a heartbeat. They're all incredible talents. But, yeah, really good to see the Titans sort of coming back and showing some form in this one and getting a good win. I also needed it as a Warriors fan. We actually, if we're going to make the top 8, teams like the Dolphins need to lose these ones. So I don't think we make the top 8. I'll be completely honest. I did a bloody ladder predictor the other night, and the Knights, who I thought have been really poor this season, their run home, I almost don't see them losing a game after Penrith. So they could be a sneaky one to make the top 8 despite how poor they've been.
I completely agree. Marju, we shouted out Greg Marju for the run home as a massive pod with Ponga back and him now lining up on Ponga's side where Ponga's favoured to attack. And we thought, dude, look at their run home. If the Knights are going to make any push for a competitive edge into the finals, like, this is the time to do it. They got one hard game in the Panthers and it's straight after their bye, you know, so like who knows kind of what could happen. And if something bad does happen, look how easy their games are. So yeah, I think Knights are a really good shout. But look, I love the Warriors. They're everyone's second favourite team. I just love the crowd. Like, it's one of my dreams to go to a Mount Smart game and watch them play. So yeah, look, I hope they make the finals. It's better when they're there.
Oh, 100%, mate. Look, absolutely love them. Speaking of the whole home crowd in Mount Smart, I actually just came out today that the Warriors are the first team in NRL history to sell out every single home game for an entire season.
Get out of town. Dude, that just goes to show you how much they love their bloody footy over there and they love their team. I think, to be honest, we need an expansion into New Zealand to bring out a second team. That would be epic.
I think we need to. It's really hard to sort of do that with, you know, the Warriors having no success in their time being in the NRL, no premierships, but the rivalry and the fact that the sales you can make, there's a market for it. The New Zealand, they get around the Warriors so much. So if we can make a rivalry and get another, maybe a South Island team like the Christchurch Kias or something, that would be an absolutely unreal expansion, something I really want to see. If it's not that, I'd love to see just a Pacific Islands team maybe based out of New Zealand as well that, you know, gets talent from Samoa and Tonga and Fiji and everything else like that. That'd be awesome as well.
100%. I loved your shout there about saying a north versus south, because that was exactly what I was thinking. Like, dude, you could make that massive. And I think the plan for the NRL is once they hit 20 teams in the comp, they're looking to reduce the competition games down to 20. So every team would only verse each other once in a year. And you could really amp up these games. I think that's kind of a really good selling point is you reduce the games for the NRL. It takes the pressure off the players and the injury risk, which makes it a lot easier for them to manage their rosters. Plus, you're also only going to get your team to see this team once a year, and you can build it up into massive history, and it only happens once a year. It's easier to keep track of the games against that team and this team, and I don't know. I can't wait until we keep blowing up.
No, I 100% agree, mate. I think it's the way forward, especially with the talent. I think people who say there's not enough talent out there to make that happen are kidding themselves. The fact that we have Trey Fullers and, you know, these three Titans fullbacks that we're just talking about, people have to sort of make way, but these are NRL quality players. We have the talent. There's so much undiscovered talent out there as well, especially in the country regions, that I think we need to invest a lot of time into. So we have the talent for it. I think when we get to 20 teams and you verse each other once a season, like how big is the Souths versus Roosters game going to be in the regular season when it's only once a season? Or how big is, you know, if we get these two New Zealand teams happening, how big is the rivalry going to be? Or Cowboys Broncos? Like, I think it's definitely the way forward. Reduces the workload on the players back down to 20 games, and it just makes every game matter in a way. So I can't wait for that.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more.
All right, let's talk a little bit more about the Titans so we don't piss off the fans. Dave Fifita, strong once again. Yeah, I mean, what can you say that hasn't already been said about Dave Fifita realistically, mate? He's so good.
Glad to see him bounce back to form, to be honest. Not that he was out of form, just that he just wasn't scoring as well in fantasy, and he's just a bit stagnant, slowly losing cash. And then this week he's just whacked out a good performance, which he kind of looked like he was going to have another bad one. I think that's the only thing I could knock him, is that when the games get tough, he goes missing. But when the games are easy or he starts to get on top, he is dominant. So, you know, Titans are in form. David Fifita's going to score well.
For sure. We mentioned Mo Fotuaika to start the session with the team of the week. His best performance of the season by far. He was absolutely extraordinary. I'll pull up his numbers for a quick little chat here. Beyond him, I thought Philip Sammy was really good. I love what he gets through for the Titans as well. He ran for 200 odd meters as well. Where are we looking at the run meters here? Phil Sammy, 25 runs for 238 meters. Yeah, mental stuff there. Where were we with Mo Fotuaika? 22 runs himself for 197 from the big front rower.
No, he would have been, buddy, top of that thing they do on the footy show, the Matty Johns show.
Oh, yeah.
Top of Phoebe Hard-Earned Index or something.
That's the one.
I think, yeah, the way he performed in that game, I didn't see it myself, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was right up the top of that. That was a massive performance by him. I just wish we could see that more from Mo.
Oh, 100%. He's one of the best front row talents in the game at the moment. He's had a very down year, but this is where I want to see Mo. It doesn't even have to be this big every week, but just more to this consistency and this level of footy. Another man that I want to give a shout out to, I think has been such a good pickup, Chris Randall. When they traded Greg Marju for him, I was like, what are you doing? But I think it's worked out well for both clubs, because Chris Randall is an absolute gun, whether he's playing hooker, lock forward, in the halves earlier in this season. He's so good.
That's it, isn't it? It's his versatility, and he can play anywhere, and he plays well. Service out of dummy half's insane. Work rate and ball play and connection with the halves out of lock, great. Like he goes unnoticed, but a lot of the stuff that he does at lock really unlocks Jaden Campbell and Kieran Foran. So yeah, I love him, and his defensive work rate is pretty solid.
100%, mate. Look, we will move on from the Titans. Sorry to spend less time and almost forget about yous, but need to wrap this up a little bit quicker. We've been going for a long, long time. Raiders, Rabbitohs. We've talked about Jamal Fogarty already and the difference he makes to this side, but this was the tip that we gave to on Ruck and Refringement podcast last week. Raiders 13 plus. Now, you never tip Raiders 13 plus, but I figured this was the time to do it. They got it done against the Rabbitohs side that, look, they're starting to show the form that they were during the early parts of this season, the Rabbitohs.
I agree. You know, it's just they've just fallen off. I guess maybe you might see some change when Murray comes back and then Latrell comes back. But I thought this was going to happen to the Rabbitohs as soon as Latrell got injured again. I thought, no, here we go, they're gone. And now Cody Walker's pretty dusty with that calf injury that kept him off at the end of the game. So who knows what that's going to lead to. But I think doesn't take away from the Raiders either. The Raiders were bloody stunning in this game, and I think they had a little bit in them to make sure that Whiten didn't get one over them. So they've definitely put it to the Rabbitohs.
100%, mate. Look, we mentioned Jamal Fogarty. The kick that he put through off the cuff when it came back, rolled back down to him. He picks it up, just looks up, and in one motion kicks it straight over to Jordan Rapana. You know, Michael Cheekham, of course, drops the ball, so that makes it all look a little bit easier. But the vision and execution from Fogarty there, I think that play in particular really shows what he can actually bring to this footy side.
Yeah, it's so inspiring for all the players around him as well. Like, just knowing you have someone like that in your team. Like, you would know playing footy yourself when it's like one of your stars is back, or like one of your favourite forwards or whatever, and your team is back. You all of a sudden feel better now going out on the field, and I think that's what Fogarty does to the whole team.
100%, mate. Look, played footy my entire life, really. I've taken this year off to focus on this, but I'm keen to get back into it. But that's just it. And when you've got a half that can do it as well, there's nothing better. You can have your best player in any other position, but to have your best player as a halfback, it's just unreal what the difference that can make to a side. Beyond that, you mentioned Hudson Young at the start of the show, made our team of the week. How good is he?
Dude, he's a stud, hey. I really like him. I used to not really like the aggro in him, but it was mostly just, just in an emotional thing in the moment. But I feel like it's that aggressive streak in his nature that makes him so good. Like, he ran for a crazy amount of meters, busted 10 or 11 tackles in that game, was offloading, it's making tackles in defense too. Like, he just looks unstoppable. Like, I think he is going to be pivotal in the Raiders' chances making the top 8.
100%, mate. He's so good, and he just feels like an Origin player as well. I feel so gutted that he's been shafted the few times he's been picked for New South Wales and then just been dropped after that because, obviously we have some quality in that position, but Hudson Young, to me, he's a New South Welshman through and through, so I'd love to see him get back in that arena. I think he will thrive when given the opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. He is a Blues player. It's weird to not see him there. I feel like he's nearly like the Lindsay Collins of the Blues, in my opinion. It's like, just lock him in, man. He's got the mongrel. Maybe he's the kind of player that I feel like they find form when they get an opportunity in Origin. It's a bit like, say, like your Latrell Mitchell. You throw him into Origin, then all of a sudden he comes back into the run home, and just before he got injured, and he's been dominant. So, hopefully he gets another chance next year, but just keep pushing until the end of the season.
For sure. Beyond that, I thought all of the Raiders outside backs were really good in this one. Now, it's been a position that they've had a lot of depth in, but never really solidified on a few players. Sebastian Chris, who's normally been a stalwart of their side, even he's been dropped this season. I thought he getting back into the side was really good. Jordan Rapana was good. Xavier Savage had some really good moments. He had a massive hit in defense for the young fella, and small body as well. Then he also scored that try not just by using his pace, but by flying high in the air. So love to see that sort of stuff from Xavier Savage as well.
Yeah, I think their back five was amazing. I'd like to see a bit more of like a solid lineup. I think the lineup that they took into this game is the lineup they need to keep moving forward. Like, you got Fogarty, Strange, Timoko, Chris, Savage, Rapana, Weeks at fullback. That's size on both edges, both centres. You've got speed and experience on either side of the field. You've got a youngster that just has all the confidence in the world in the halves who could defend better than a lock forward. And then you've got Fogarty with the guidance, and then you've got a young Weeks who's on fire at the back. Like, it just seems like all they need is just some time together and they're on.
I could not agree more, mate. Look, beyond that for the Raiders, Joseph Tarpany got through his usual work of 160 odd metres. I actually better get that up. That might be unders for what Joseph Tarpany gets through in any given week. Joseph Tarpany... Oh, by the way, Hudson Young, 207 metres. Crazy stuff for a second rower.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't believe it. And yeah, you're spot on there with Tarpany as well at 162.
There you go. I know my footy. Zach Hosking, I know, didn't get too much in this game, but another man that since he came back last week, which we didn't do the podcast on, so I wanted to touch on him. Love what he does. I love his defensive efforts. You know, the whole tackle around the legs isn't really in the NRL too much anymore because of quick play the balls, but somehow Zach Hoskins not only chops players down, but he still manages to get them onto their backs. I'm like, how does he do it, mate?
Yeah, he does definitely go the old legs tackle, and then he seems to do like a rotation when he does it. So he kind of lands on top of them and then pushes up off them, and then it's kind of stops them from moving. It's kind of like, I don't know if it's intentional or if it's instinctual, but in terms of fantasy, keep an eye on him because we've seen what he could do at the start of the year, break even 67 now. He got a 33 last week. If he averages, 40 over the next 3 games, he's going to be under 550 grand, which is a steal. So, yeah, I've definitely got my eyes on him.
Love that call. Yeah, no, he's got some of the best tackle technique in the game. Look, let's move over to the Rabbitohs and talk a little bit more about them before wrapping up. Very disappointing sort of game in this one. You know, they technically still had touch with the top 8, not so much anymore. Commanding performance by the Raiders, which is something that they haven't fully put together this season to get a 20-point win over the Rabbitohs here. I think it speaks more of where the Rabbitohs are at. Lots of senior players missing from this squad. No Latrell Mitchell, no Cameron Murray. Still no, we think of their halves. There's no Lachlan Elias from the start of the season as well. They've toyed around a lot there. Campbell Graham hasn't played all season. Missing a lot of players, and, you can contribute that, and they all play into it, but in the end, it's not good enough standard of footy.
Nah, I think Wayne Bennett coming back next year, hopefully with the injection of Ewan Aitken and Tavita Pengai Jr. is going to definitely create some depth there. Aitken's got the centre versatility as well. So, they've got to have Campbell Graham. I think next year is pivotal for the Rabbits, and I think you're going to actually seriously see them surge back into form with Wayne Bennett back. They all seem to be very happy with that decision. So I'm keen for that. But I think, special shout out to Kaloa Matangi. We kind of touched on this before, but he's playing lock now and dominating. I think Cam Murray is probably likely to push him back to the edge in the run home, but possibly not. But he's been dominant, really, really good. And Jack Whiten moving into the halves has really saved them, to be honest. I thought they were going to get the spoon for a long time there. And Whiten coming into the halves has just really created guidance on both sides of the field. So I've been really impressed with both of those guys.
I'm with you 100% there, mate. Keon Kaloa Matangi, his stats in this game, 30 runs for 243 metres at lock forward. What was the tackle count? 41 tackles, 2 missed as well. He keeps doing it. 47 tackles from Tallis Duncan in the second row as well, by the way. So shout out young Tallis Duncan. Mate, the other one that you mentioned there, Jack Whiten. Him at 5'8" has been a master stroke of moving him back there and freeing up. The big question wasn't whether or not he could do it, in my opinion. It was whether or not Cody Walker could control the side or at least have the kicking game that you really need in a halfback. And I think Cody Walker has definitely found that. I was very much of the mold that Jack Whiten should have been in the halves since they bought him. Obviously, at the start, I wasn't too sure if Cody Walker could be halfback, but he's a star player. He's a star signing. You want his hands on the ball as much as possible. So I hope they just keep him there no matter what. Cody Walker getting pretty on in age as well. Whether or not he goes around too many more seasons, you can't really keep him at 5'8" for too much longer.
Nah, not that long. And you notice this one, he's getting the old man calf injury. So he's starting to get that niggle, which is kind of a sign, that you need to move or protect yourself. And I think that, look, Whiten as a half too, he's just solid. You know, he kind of like a developed Ethan Strange, in my opinion. It's like that's what Ethan Strange could be in the future. And Whiten is he's got a good kicking game. He's a solid runner of the ball. He's also got a great support play connection game. So he's not someone you can kind of assume he's going to pass or assume he's going to run, because he will punish you either way. And they've got now that both sides in the field. I think the problem is they're both left foot kickers off the top of my head. I can't remember for certain, which is going to maybe... Yeah, it's going to maybe limit their versatility moving forward. But I don't really think it's that much of a deal, to be honest. It's not that big a deal that you would throw one of them out of the halves to change things. I just think they need to run with it. It's the best halves they got at the club at the moment.
The other big thing is whether or not Cody Walker has that massive boot on him. Latrell actually does. So when they do have Latrell in this side, he can, chew off the long kicks if they need to. They don't need a long kick every set. You can still leave your bombing up to your Cody Walker and your Jack Whiten. But if you need to chew off a lot of meters and get some distance down the field, you can always pass it back to Latrell and let him send it. But the man replacing him at fullback, Jai Gray, the young fella, 26 runs for 250 metres from him as well, which I thought was a massive effort in this game. In Canberra against the Raiders, to be chewing off that many metres at his size, that's incredible stuff.
Yeah, he's massive. Look, I'll give you a little secret here. It's all in his first name, Jai. So if he didn't have that, he'd be horrible. But nah. And to be completely honest, he's impressive. Like, he's more akin to the garden gnome or something like that in the backyard, but he plays so far above his weight. Like, he's really impressive, and I admire those guys like that. It's like he's definitely, I'm joking about him now, but he's definitely copped that crap his whole career from genuine people that think he doesn't have what it takes. And now he's made it to the NRL and he's proven that, hey, I don't give a crap how big I am. This is what I can do. And I love that. It's like the full underdog story, and he's proving himself here. The only thing standing in his way is Latrell Mitchell.
100%, mate. No, he's absolute gun. You'd wonder, with Latrell coming back at fullback, maybe the future is for him at 5'8", but as we just touched on Jack White, and you can't really be making moves there. Still very young in his career, Jai Gray, so we'll have to see how that all plays out. But he plays well above his weight. I love what he does for the Rabbitohs. Last thing I wanted to touch on for this game and for this wrap-up, Alex Johnston doing his Achilles, which has now sidelined him for the rest of this season, which is really gutting stuff for him, especially, chasing down that record. Achilles is one of the worst injuries you can do as a rugby league player. That's a 6 to 8th month recovery on that one, especially for someone like him who relies on his speed and explosiveness. It's a hard one to come back from. So really gutting to see him not only not be able to chase down that record this season any further in this season, but to see his season ended that way is quite disappointing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I couldn't say anything to add to that. It's a sad injury. I think it's going to impact his explosiveness when he comes back as well. It's not really what he wants, but look, as long as he returns for a few more opportunities to beat that try-scoring record, I'm sure he'll be able to go down in history and smile at himself.
100%, mate. I'll still back him in for it if he comes back fit and healthy from that injury. Mate, that wraps us up for the wrap-up. Let's just do a quick round of tipping here for round 22, and then I'll get out of your hair, mate. So kicking things off on the Thursday, we have the West Tigers taking on the Cowboys at Leichhardt Oval. Who have you got, mate?
Cowboys. I think it's a safe play here, especially with rumours that Galvin and Galvin and
Appy?
Who was the other dude? Appy. No, was it Appy? Who was the guy? I think it was someone else in the team. Doesn't really matter, but there's two people in their team that have a bit of an injury cloud over them. Not that they are injured, but they could possibly be injured next week. We just haven't had news on them. Possibly we have. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, but yeah, I think it doesn't really matter. Cowboys did what they did against the Sharks last week without their full team, and they're going to be able to beat the Tigers.
100%, mate. Can't add anything more to that. I will also be tipping the Cowboys. Next up, Go Media Stadium, Auckland. The Warriors take on the Parramatta Eels. Who have you got?
I'm going to go an underdog here, and I'm so sorry, but I'm going for the Eels.
You're not, mate.
I'm sorry. The only reason is what they showed me against the Storm is enough for me to think that's going to be competitive if they can pull that through, and they've got all the odds against them. It's like they are at the Warriors. Look, I say this now, but there's a very, very real chance that once they get close to the game, I'm going to go, there's no way, and flick back to the Warriors. But yeah.
Mate, we've gone almost 3 hours into this recording, and then you hit me with that. I could have just, had I known that, I wouldn't have even invited you on, mate. Nah.
Oh, well.
I'm taking the Wars. Look, at home, I think, playing for our season, I think we have to get it done. But you do raise some good points with the way that the Eels played against the Storm. So I like that. But no, Wars at home, full crowd, playing for the finals. We win this one. Next up, Dolphins and Roosters. This one is in Perth, so it's technically a Dolphins home game, but neutral venue for this one, which is quite important. Dolphins 8th, Roosters 3rd on the ladder. Who you got?
Roosters, but not even hesitating. I think they're 100% to win that.
I'm in the same boat. I think Dolphins haven't shown enough as of late to really, warrant tipping them. And the Roosters, they one of the heavyweights of the competition. So I will also be taking the Chooks. Next up, Queensland Derby, Seabus Super Stadium. The Gold Coast Titans take on the Brisbane Broncos. Jai, who you got, mate?
Again, that's another little bit of an underdoggy. I don't know if you can really call it that, but Titans for me. Just mostly because there's so many factors. My mate goes for them and I can't stand them. And the Titans are in a bit of form and Broncos are struggling. So I'm just hoping that Titans can edge this one out again. A little close win.
No, I respect that, mate. I will be going for the favourite. I'd assume they're the favourites. No odds as of yet. But I'll take the Broncos. Not on any, form guide or whatnot. Just I'm going to keep backing him in since I did from the start of the season. They have to turn it around, right? So I'll take the Broncos. Next up, mate, the Melbourne Storm take on the St. George Illawarra Dragons in Amy Park, Melbourne. So 1st versus 10th on the ladder.
Put the house on the Storm. You'll pay off your mortgage in one game. Do it. Don't do it. Tip the Storm.
Depends how much you're putting on it. They're probably only paying about $1.17 to win this one. But I'll also be taking the Melbourne Storm. Look, I do think Dragons maybe bounce back, but not in Amy Park and not against, the best team in the comp.
Yeah, I agree.
Next up, mate, your Sharkies take on the South Sydney Rabbitohs. This one, of course, home game for you guys. 4th versus 15th.
Sharkies, look, in saying that, I would be a lot more hesitant. I'm never going to tip against my team, ever. I don't care if they're last and they're versus Storm. But if they're in being logically minded, if they had Latrell Mitchell and they had Cam Murray and they were all fit and all firing, I'd be a lot more worried. But I think that Cam Murray's only coming back next week. Cody Walker's got an injury scare. Latrell Mitchell's still not there. Alex Johnson just out for the season. I think the Sharks need to win now if they want to stay in that top 4 and get a second chance opportunity. So, I'm just going for the Sharkies.
Yeah, I'm with you there, mate. I think that they're the easy choice here. I think it's almost an interesting round. I don't want to be that sort of guy that picks the favourites in every game, but there are some stark comparisons into sides, and I do think the Sharkies are very much warranted favourites. So I'll be tipping them in this one. We then have the Panthers taking on the Knights, 2nd versus 11th.
Panthers easily, and I think it's going to be 30 plus. That's how big I think it's going to be. I think Panthers are going to blow them out of the water.
Wow. I'm backing you 100%. I said last week on the Ruck Infringement podcast that I was a little bit worried about the Dragons game, but at the same time, I thought that the Panthers, this is their time to really just put their foot on the accelerator and show we are the best team in the comp and we're going to win every game from here on out by 30-odd points. I think the Knights, despite where they're positioned on the ladder, they have been really, really poor this season. I can't get behind their attack, their defence, just everything about them. Yeah, I'm taking the Panthers and I'm backing them in a big one here.
Mm-hmm.
Lastly, we do have the Bulldogs and the Raiders, probably the toughest game of the round 2 pick. This is 5th versus 9th. It is in Belmore, so Doggies home game. Who have you got, mate?
Yeah, this is probably the hardest to pick, and I think arguably it might be one of the most interesting to watch as well, with the way that both teams are positioned. The 5th and 9th, Doggies can't really afford to lose any games. Raiders need to win one, but I think Doggies, I can't turn off them. I actually really enjoy watching them play at the moment, so Doggies all the way.
I feel you there, mate. I've doubted Bulldogs all season, and you know it's really cost me, especially in the tipping department. I want to tip them here just because I do actually think that they will win. As you said, I think it'll be an interesting game because they're both teams that get into a dogfight without the pun. They really love that sort of scrappy nature of a game, so I think it'll actually be a really interesting one. And by all means, I should tip the Dogs just because I think they are the better team. I think they will win. But I'll take the Raiders, so I have at least something a little bit different this week. I've got one upset in there. I think Raiders have the potential to get it done. They showed enough against the Rabbitohs to have me believe in them with Jamal Fogarty back. So I'll take the Raiders as my upset for the round.
It's a nice punt.
Awesome. And that one wraps us up, mate. I cannot thank you enough for joining us on today's podcast with your beautiful footy mind and for sitting through this much shit, the errors that we've had along the way as well. Tell everyone where they can find you, mate.
Oh, yeah. All main social media handles, Instagram, Facebook are our main ones. Blindside NRL. You'll be able to go on there, check everything out. Mostly focus on NRL Fantasy. You've got our website, Blindside NRL. Everything's Blindside NRL. Podcasts and YouTube coming out next year in the preseason.
Beautiful stuff, mate. As I said, hopefully we can get a bit of content ready for next season as well between us and try and iron out a bit more there if I haven't talked your ear off already.
Oh, mate, dude, I absolutely have the pleasure to do that with you. I admire the way that you look at the game. I admire that there's somebody else out here that loves it as much as I do. So, dude, thanks so much for even giving me an opportunity on your podcast. I can tell you guys are going to be big sometime in the future. Keep pushing it. I'm loving it.
Mate, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you for your kind words. That one will wrap us up. As we've said, Jai over at Blindside, you guys know where to find him. Thank you guys for tuning into this one. I'll see you guys next time.